Good evening, and welcome to the 2014 Annual Town Meeting. Thank you all for coming out and coming out promptly so we can get started. The tellers have informed me that a quorum is present, so the meeting will come to order. The return of the warrant by the town constable shows that the warrant was properly served, so the meeting is properly constituted. We'll begin our meeting tonight with a Pledge of Allegiance as we do every meeting. Please stand and join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance . Thank you. Please join me in a moment of silence for members of the town who died during 2013 and who had served the town. I'll read their names and then we'll have a brief moment of silence. Thomas Hernan, Jacqueline McGuire, Francis Sargent, Kieran Dunn, Irene Brown, Alton Flynn, Stella McDonald, Linwood Davis, Artie Yestaby, Paula Logan, Martha Morrison, and Alan Weisenflug. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Let me begin by introducing your town officials who are sitting up here at the front of the room. To my left and your right is our Board of Selectmen, Chairman Fred Coed, Diane Kennedy, Vice Chairman, Martha Yestamy, Steve Gomer, and Karen Quigley. Town Manager, our new Town Manager for his first town meeting, Chris Senior. I don't know if she's here yet, the Director of Finance, Mary Gallagher. In the audience is our Treasurer-Collector, Paula Linaran, and Town Council, Paul Durensis, up here at that table. In the large table to my right, your left, is our Advisory Board, Peter Pescator, Chairman, Robert Benson, Tanya Bodell, George Chamillard, Richard Fitzpatrick, Leland Jenkins, Linda Mooney, Tom Reardon, and Nan Roth. To my immediate right, your left, our Town Clerk, Carol St. Pierre, and the Assistant Town Clerk, Elizabeth Anderson. And behind the Advisory Board are tellers who will be used if we have to have a hand count: Charles Higginson, Ginevra Higginson, Betts Murray, and Wisner Murray. Our guest policy is that non-registered voters are required to wear name tags. And that identifies them as not being a registered voter so that they will not vote during the voting portions of the meeting. If they are affiliated with a board or a committee or a sector of the town government, then they have a little colored dot on their name tag, and they're permitted to sit here in the main section meeting, and they will move to the non-voting section if we have to have a hand vote. If they do not work for a particular or affiliated with a particular committee or group, then they will be sitting in the non-voting section. Let me call to your attention the difference between the warrant, which all of you received in the mail. This happens to be a Xerox copy, but the ones you received in the mail are bound. And the motions, which are the stapled pages that you should have gotten when you checked in. The motions are the actual language that we'll be acting on this evening. In some cases, the motions refer to text that was longer than is set forth in the warrant. But as we go through the meeting, you should be following along using the packet of motions rather than the warrant, because in some cases the language is different. And for those of you who've been in the meeting before, you'll know that I'll typically start action on each article by asking for a motion in the form distributed to the meeting. That refers to the text of the motion that's set forth in this packet. And so as we start discussion, that will be the motion under consideration. We'll vote by a voice vote unless I'm uncertain or at least 7 voters stand to indicate that they doubt my count. If necessary, we'll vote by a hand ballot. The tellers will take their stations midway through the hall, and they will count as appropriate. Voters, when we get to a hand count, voters must be sitting in the designated seating area, so you don't want to be in the non-voting section if you're a voter, and the non-voters, of course, need to move to the non-voting section. If you would like to speak on a motion, please move to the microphone to be recognized. Once recognized, please begin by giving your name and street address. Please keep the debate concise and to the point. All debate, of course, must be courteous and respectful. Brevity is both courteous and effective. Sarcasm is never appropriate. It generally should not be necessary to refer to specific individuals involved in the debate. Address your comments to me or to the meeting, not to a particular prior speaker, and avoid using the prior speaker's name if at all possible. If you believe it will be necessary to speak more than 5 minutes, please let me know in advance. And under our bylaws, you cannot speak on an article more than twice unless you are making an explanation or responding to a question. If at any point you have a question about the procedure of the conduct of the meeting, including a concern that I may have done something incorrectly, you should seek to be recognized. Let me know you have a point of order, and then state your question or concern. One of our procedural motions that many of you are familiar with is the motion for previous question, or moving the question. It brings an immediate vote on the pending motion, so it stops debate. Requires 2/3 vote for adoption. I will only recognize it after both sides have had a fair opportunity to be heard, and if there are people who have already recognized intending to speak, I may permit them to speak before ruling on the motion to move the question. We do have 29 articles before us this evening. I think there's a chance we can get through them all tonight. There's also a decent chance that we cannot get them through them all tonight. My plan is to get to about 10 or 10:30 and make a call as to whether, if we power through and keep going, we can get through them tonight by 11:30 or midnight. I know that's late, but otherwise we'll be coming back for another evening. If by 10 or 10:30 it looks like we cannot get through tonight, then I think it would be appropriate to adjourn to tomorrow evening. But we'll plan to at least power through till then to see how we're doing. Probably we'll end up taking a very brief break around 9 or 9:30 just to let people stand and stretch their legs. Are there any questions before we jump into the formal business? Very well. We'll proceed to action under Article 1, which is the annual town report. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. This is simply approving the reports of the various town officers in the annual report. Is there any discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 1, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Proceed to Article 2, reports of committees. There are no reports, so may I have a motion that action under Article 2 be indefinitely postponed? Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. Is there any discussion? Very well. We'll proceed to a voice vote. Motion under Article 2. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. We'll proceed to action under Article 3, our operating budget. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. I'll recognize our town manager, Mr. Chris Senior.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and members of the town meeting. It's a great honor for me to be with you tonight. I covered many town meetings as a reporter back in my early days, and this is the first one I've actually been on this side of the aisle for. So I've already had the camera pointed at me a few times, which I'm not used to. So I will begin tonight with highlights of the 2015 budget and how it was developed, and I promise to be relatively brief. And I have Mary Gallagher, our Director of Finance, as my able assistant. The 2015 budget process actually began in calendar year 2013, long before I came to Cohasset. The selectmen developed and adopted budget guidelines back in the early fall, which laid out a path for adoption of the budget. And that was followed through by the acting town manager, Mr. Malinowski, who put together the budget of department heads, and spent a lot of time and energy putting that all together during the fall. As well, during that period, the school committee went to work, the school department staff, led by Barbara Cataldo, and they put together their preliminary work on the budgets, and the budget advisory group met, and they continued the conversation. So when I came on board in mid-January, there was a lot of work done, and so I got to jump into that process immediately when I came in January. At that point, I had several meetings with the selectmen in public session. We talked about their goals and objectives. I think within a week, I think Paul Schubert had me on speed dial, so I was on the phone with him on a pretty regular basis. Met with Barbara Cataldo and members of the school staff, and spent a lot of time with them, with the selectmen, with the advisory committee, and with a number of residents talking about the budget and priorities and where we are and where we're going. So it was a lot of collaboration, a lot of exchange of ideas, lots of internal analysis. Mary and I spent a lot of quality time together going over numbers, and the result that is presented before you tonight are numbers that were endorsed by the budget planning group and then unanimously by both the selectmen and the school committee. The big pie chart here shows the basics of the revenue portion of this budget. It's just slightly over $40 million, and this does not include the water and sewer enterprise funds. As you can see, the lion's share of revenue in this town comes from property taxes. The next largest component is local revenues, which include mostly motor vehicle excise tax and permit fees and things of that nature. And then there's state aid. The tax levy is within the 2.5% cap. The state aid, as last year in FY 2014, or the year we're currently in, accelerated quite a lot, 20%. So the foundation of state aid has now gone back up to not quite to pre-recession levels, but on the path. The 2015 number's up a little bit, but this budget recognizes the foundation of state aid has risen dramatically. On the expense side, the $40 million goes to support town and school services. And again, the largest single piece is the school budget, and then the town side, and then the shared expenses. The shared expenses primarily are health care and expenses related to pensions and debt service. That's where the lion's share of the shared budget expenses are. The FY 2015 budget also recognizes the full implementation of negotiated union contracts that were done in 2013, and they were funded by this meeting last year with a special article. So, but the 2014 operating budget didn't include all those increases. 2015 was the first time it went in. So it's important to recognize that if you take that piece out, which was funded separately, the actual increase in the budget this year is only about 2.5%. One of the biggest elements of continuing the very strong fiscal foundation that's been laid here was to build the reserve funds. So there's a 30% increase going into reserve funds from FY 14 to FY 15 in this proposed budget. And again, that's a commitment to Cohasset's fiscal future that's been laid and determined, and this is something that was strongly encouraged to continue, and I've continued it with this recommendation. Now, the town has spent a fair amount of resources to begin to redevelop infrastructure, particularly in the IT area. And that solid financial footing that's been put into place is now bearing fruit. One of the things that just came in this month, I was happy to go over there with Chief Sylvia the other day to see the new ambulance that's been delivered, and that's now on site, and it's about to be rolled out into service. And one of the things that we were able to do was repurpose the old ambulance to work with the facilities department. It's going to become a rolling repair center, so they'll be able to store materials and go from site to site. Are we having, can you hear me? Okay. Because I'm hearing you fine. Thank you. All right. Is that better? Okay. Sorry. So the fertility department, so we've been able to repurpose that device. It's going to save us money. The money the town would have gotten by repurposing that, by selling it in the open market, was nothing. So it saved money. It's going to increase our ability to do work. And that kind of collaborative effort between Mark Kelly of Facilities and Chief Sylvia was an excellent sign of the kind of work that goes on here. The IT projects continue to be implemented here in Cohasset, and that's critical in this day and age. Last year, this town meeting approved GIS implementation, and I'm proud to say that it's underway, and I'll talk about that in just a second. The all facilities sticker is now also going online. That'll be rolled out next month. It'll be the first time you can order one of those online. And the new town webpage, the foundation which had been laid, is also ongoing. A GIS is Geographic Information System, so basically it's electronic mapping. And what it's going to be able to do is what you see behind me is look at Cohasset in a whole lot of levels and layers. The staff team, which is led by our IT Commissioner Rob Bonnell and Brian Joyce, and as well as our Assessor Mary Quill, have moved the town from discussion into full implementation. So what you're going to be able to do is zoom in. You'll be able to see on the website now we have a small version of the Muni Mapper. We'll eventually be able to look at not only the aerial views, but also detailed views of the zoning map, the sewer map, assessment data, things you now have to go to physically to town hall to get. We're hoping to have that up and accessible later this spring. So it's something that the foundation's been laid and we'll be able to move that forward. Something else that's been an issue from the day I started and we've been working towards is a new town website. That's what it looks like today. And that's what it's going to look like tomorrow. Not literally tomorrow, but soon after tomorrow. Again, this is another big project that Rob Bonnell has led. We have Ian Lister of our staff is doing the internal staff work. So Rob has been doing the technical side. Ian's been working with the staff to populate this. So again, hopefully by late spring, you'll be able to click on this, go right to one side, go to quick links. You don't have to dig into the page. And then you'll also be able to pull up a calendar and see, for example, pull up something right there. You want to go to see the Capital Budget Committee, you'll be able to click right on that, pull up their agenda without having to dig deep into the site. And again, this will be an ongoing project. We want to put a lot of pictures. We want to really have represent the town. You can see the boats from the harbor up top, so we want to do more of those things. And again, the work on 2015, as it begins to, this part of it wraps up, the work on 2016 already begins. This is an ongoing effort. Planning really has effectively begun for the 2016 budget. And it's all about building on the strong fiscal foundation that's already in place. It's going to involve staff and citizens and the kind of collaborative effort that I found that Cohasset really prizes and really makes this whole community go. It's been a very exciting time for me these last 90 days. It seems a lot, in a very good way, like more than 90 days that I've been here. There's been great staff. I've gotten to work with some very smart and dedicated residents. And it's a very beautiful place to work, to live, work, and play. And I'm looking forward to this budget and preparing many others in the months and years ahead with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Board of Selectmen, I'll recognize Mr. Fred Coed.
Good evening. Article 3 is your town's budget for fiscal year 2015. This has not been a normal budget season, to say the least. There have been many moving pieces, and Chris Sr. has done a great job of balancing the many demands on Cohasset's finances. Early in the year, the budget planning group voted to have our new town manager work out a compromise between the differences in proposed spending between the town side and the school side. It is the nature of compromise that not everybody is totally happy with the outcome, but we feel it is a budget that strikes the best balance. Some members of the advisory committee have concerns about structural issues in the budget that may have serious negative consequences in the near future. The selectmen and the town manager share those concerns, and we will address those issues to ensure the continued fiscal health of Cohasset. Cohasset was one of the few towns to maintain appreciating property values in the state during the recession, and the U.S. News and World Report recently rated Cohasset as the 13th best high school in the state. These are two signs of a desirable and fiscally healthy town. A good school system creates demand in the housing market that preserves our property values and solidifies our tax base. State aid has been strong, and we are cautiously optimistic that income sources will continue to grow. The school department has managed to provide Cohasset kids with a first-class education without overrides while working under tight fiscal restraints and increased enrollment. The Board of Selectmen has been realistic in trying to recognize real needs and funding those needs to meet realistic demands of residents for services on both the town side and the school side. There is a delicate balance in weighing these needs for public safety, public works, education, and elder affairs. But if we work together to face the challenges before us, Cohasset will prosper. I believe this budget strikes the necessary balance. It gives the schools in the town the resources needed to continue to build upon the strong foundation of the past and to create a better future for all of us. The selectmen recommend this budget 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. For the advisory committee, I'll recognize Mr. Peter Pescatore.
Good evening. The advisory committee had a motion to approve the budget, and we ended up voting 5-4 not to approve the budget. The 4 members that voted for the budget felt that the legacy issues and the disruption issues that voting against this budget could cause were going to be too detrimental for the town. And while the remaining 5 of us felt that that certainly was a risk, and we certainly didn't want to undermine the new town manager, who we think is doing a terrific job. But in the face of the budget, I think some of the facts need to be explained, and we think all 9 of the members of the advisory committee think that the budget, as it's cast, puts too much money into the departments, into the operating departments, into the foundation that goes forward. Nobody ever takes money out of the department expenses. So just for a little review, the town manager showed that our revenue stream comes from taxes for the most part. We don't get a whole lot from the state. And that tax base is residential by design. The town fathers have long kept the business zoning to a minimum to keep the flavor of the town the way it is. So there's only about a 7% commercial base in Cohasset. So all of the revenues that we get, and you saw on the slide it was 85% is tax-based, come from residential. And residential opportunities in Cohasset are finite. You know, we don't have a whole lot of property to develop. And at some point, the cost line and the revenue line are going to intersect. And it's out in the future, but we think that this budget brings that eventuality closer in. And, you know, when we start hitting that, then the alternative will be overrides or, you know, change in services. Now, just a little history for you. Going back to fiscal 2011, the allocation that was put aside for town and schools in total was $540,000. In 12, it was 604. In fiscal 13, it was 759. Fiscal 14, it was 608. And this budget started off, the fiscal 15 budget, at 682 in mid-October. It rose to 802 in November. And then December 11th, it was announced in the paper at $1,319,000. Now, it's very difficult to backpedal away from something that's been published as the budget, when in fact it had never been voted on or reviewed. So the committee applauds the town manager for his hard work against a lot of pressure to get it down to $1,181,000, but that doubles the allocation from the prior year. So we're going from 608 to $1,002,000 for funds going into the departmental budgets. Now, there's no doubt that the revenue side of the equation is definitely has increased, both from state funding, as the town manager mentioned, and also the fees that we've raised over the last few years. So the revenue increase is real, and the only question that we have is, are we really spending that in the best way? And again, just let me say it again. We've doubled the amount of money that's going into departmental budgets. Now, we argued about it very strenuously in the committee, and we don't, you know, we don't pretend to have a number that it should be, but we would urge the town meeting to keep in mind that we think this level of spending is not sustainable for the town long term. And we voted against this budget for that reason. We think a 50% increase or something like that, I think everybody would be happy with taking a 50% increase. We're trying to get to a AAA bond rating, and this is a nice opportunity with this, this kind of largesse to put additional funds into reserves that would count for the bond rating, count with the bond rating people, to try and get us to AAA. You know, in the near future, we're talking about doing a new town hall. You know, we've got other projects coming on. There'll be capital money needed. We'll be out in the bond market again. It's nice to have a AAA rating. I mean, we can live without it. But the advisory committee, again, we're a split vote, mainly around the issue of not causing more chaos in the town. The financial side of it, we're unanimous. None of us think that this is a budget that should be passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Yes, Mr. Dick.
Good evening. My name is Mike Dick. I live at 27 Parker Ave. First thing I'd like to do is welcome Mr. Senior. I'm sure many of us in the room haven't seen you before, so I'm glad to have you around. I've heard nothing but good things. Regarding the budget, I'm disappointed that there were no budget spreadsheets handed out with our warrants. Nothing to follow along with, but I did make some notes. If we have more revenue, why not put it towards reserve funds or the OPED, so-called? And the number one question I have is, what has driven the $608,000 to $1.2 million? What is the underlying reason there? And then Mr. Coed mentioned some structural problems, and that also is somewhat curious. I'd like to hear more about what structural problems we're facing going forward, and if we need all of this extra revenue to help deal with those. I just don't know. So thank you.
Thank you. So I think there were two questions in there, one related to the increase and the other related to the structural issues. Mr. Senior, do you want to respond to at least the first one, if not both?
I just want to say, by the way, that the budget information is all in the warrant. So I apologize for not also including it in the motion packet. So it's a rookie error in that case, but it is all in the warrant. So and I'm hopeful that next year I'll have everything on the web way before, so you'll be able to look at it there as well. One of the things that in my short tenure looking at this, again, one of the things that happened this year is, again, the union contracts that were negotiated a year or more ago caught up with the budget this year. They were funded with a separate article, and this year they all went into the budget. So it looks like a larger number in this year than it really is, because the money was in a separate article last year. As I said, that was roughly a third of the increase this year. So the actual underlying increase is only about 2.5%. Again, what's showing in the operating budget on both sides is a catch-up. And on the school side, there were a few other issues that had to do with, that were also catch-up, that were one-time kind of events. So it's not like spending has suddenly skyrocketed. This is this year. This is a catch-up to reality that the town has already approved. But I think the point that Chairman Coed has pointed out, and the advisory committee, is that there are the single biggest expense and the single biggest resource in this town is its staff, and it's the people who make it go. And the union contracts are all going to be coming up together next June. And this is the right time to have those conversations about where the town is and can afford to be going forward, because that is the single biggest driver of the expenses in town. And that's really the issue. It's the underlying costs of services, which are mostly people.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Kasparowicz.
Ray Kasparowicz, 172 South Main Street. Pardon my inattention, but I want to make sure I have this right. Mr. Pescatore, I think you said that the increase this year went from 600 and some thousand to $1.3 million. Did I understand that correctly? Or am I way off base?
14 was 608, and the proposed budget got as high as $1,319,000. It's down to $1,181,000, nearly twice the 14 allocation.
Okay. So then, Peter, I guess you may be getting this one too. The town manager said that the bulk of the increase, I guess, is for salary, contract.
Yeah, I didn't really
Funding.
want to get into a lot of detail here, but the fact of the matter is, it's majority of the money is going to salary.
Would you say it's
And,
okay?
you know, there's really, for this magnitude of money, there isn't really any identifiable new service that the town is going to get.
Okay, just for my own comfort, can you say it's 70% of the increase?
I think it's more closer to 90.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DiCaprio.
Peter DiCaprio, 555 Jerusalem Road. What happens if this budget doesn't pass?
I'll recognize our town council, Mr. Paul DeRenzis.
The law requires us to have a balanced budget in order to set the tax rate. If you do not adopt a balanced budget tonight, you will have to come back and adopt one at another time.
Is there further discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. The motion under Article 3 does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion on Article 3, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted by the requisite 2/3 vote. We'll proceed to action on Article 4, unpaid bills from previous years. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require 80% vote for adoption. The Board of Selectmen has voted in favor of adoption of this motion by a vote of 5-0. The Advisory Committee has voted in favor of adoption by a vote of 7-0. Is there any discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote on the motion on Article 4. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. We'll proceed to action on Article 5, supplemental appropriations for fiscal 2014. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. I'll recognize our town manager, Mr. Chris Senior.
The single largest piece of this, as you can see, is directly related to the very long and cold winter we had, which is snow and ice. And despite that, we were able to keep the tapping of the stabilization fund below that number by squeezing the rest of the budget down. So this is a rebalancing that, except for snow and ice, keeps us within the operating parameters set last year.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen has asked me to let you know that they voted to recommend adoption by a vote of 5-0. The Advisory Committee also recommended adoption, also by a vote of 5-0. Is there any discussion? Mr. Wakeman.
Sam Wakeman, 255 Atlantic Avenue. I have a question that's confusing to me. You have an appropriation for $35,000 for streetlights. It's my understanding that has already been appropriated in a prior fiscal year.
Mr. Senior.
This is not for the purchase of the streetlights, it's for the electricity to pay for the streetlights, because the purchase has not yet been completed. So that's what that's about.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote under Article 5. It does require a 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion under Article 5, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Proceed to Article 6, Stabilization Funds. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. Christy, do you want to say anything on this? We'll start with the OPED, Chair of the OPED Committee, Mr. Tim Davis.
Thank you. I'm Tim Davis, and I'm here representing the OPED Committee. Last fall, I came before you to report on the other post-employment benefits, or OPED, situation, as well as the current insurance costs that the town is incurring. I presented a strategy and a series of steps to reform the system, bend the cost curve, and begin to fund those unfunded liabilities. Well, I can tell you that some progress has been made. It is like telling you we applied some caulking to the hull of the Titanic and then saying that progress has been made. In fiscal year 2013, the unfunded OPED liability was $36.2 million, a number approximately equal to the town budget. For fiscal year 2015, it will be approaching $40 million. In FY14, 10% of the town budget went to pay for medical costs. Medical costs are projected to grow between 5 and 10% a year, depending on whose projections you read. And we know our revenues in the town can only grow at 2.5 to 3% a year. If we do nothing to solve this problem, the school, police, fire, and other town budgets will be significantly and adversely impacted. If there are those among us who hope that the state will bail us out, let me say that that's highly unlikely, given that the insurance and pension liability of the state itself is in dire straits. The good people of Detroit hoped that the state of Michigan was going to bail them out, and we know where that got them. Hope is not a strategy. Town Manager Senior has started to address this issue, but he needs the strong support of the Board of Selectmen, the school board, and all the citizens of Cohasset to bring these costs under control. My colleagues and I on the OPED committee ask for your support of Chris Senior as he works on this very difficult and very important problem. Thank you.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen has recommended adoption of this motion by a vote of 5-0, and the Advisory Committee recommends adoption by a vote of 8-0. Is there discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote under Article 6. The motion on Article 6, it does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion on Article 6, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Proceed to action under Article 7, Capital Improvements Budget. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. Motion has been made. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does again require 2/3 vote for adoption. Recognized from the Capital Budget Committee, Mr. Jack Kanaile.
Good evening. I'm Jack Kanaile. I'm the chairman of the Capital Budget Committee. I'd just like to give you a little bit of background before I get started on the items we've recommended to the selectmen and the town meeting. Capital budget's in charge of reviewing all purchases that are greater than $11,000 and have a life greater than 18 months. So we tend to look at things like buses, buildings, large construction projects, and large purchases of computers. For years, the Capital Stabilization Fund was underfunded due to mostly our financial circumstances, not having any free cash to put into the stabilization funds. And this year, you're witnessing the first time we've actually funded capital stabilization with a significant amount of money. We take this as a large responsibility, and we spent a significant amount of time this year reviewing all our capital projects. We had over $3 million worth of requests. We ended up approving approximately $950,000 worth of purchases. Our priorities have been and still remain public safety and projects that are defined and required under the law. After that, we're starting to look at buildings, maintenance, roads. We've underfunded a lot of this over the years, and we're going to make a concerted effort to audit the building structures. You'll see in our list here tonight, we've appropriated approximately $20,000 to actually build a capital list. We're going to go around and tag our assets and put them into a database, and we're going to use a software package that actually allows us to track all the software in town. That includes HVAC systems on top of the buildings, cars, trucks, desks. We've never done this before, so this is, we feel like this is a fairly large project and innovation for the town. For this year, some of the bigger items that we've recommended to the selectmen are the $158,000 for the Bow Street Causeway. That's matched with a grant of a significant amount of money, so the actual cost to the town is approximately $40,000. We also have another very large project with the Osgood School. There have been issues over the years with the heater control system, heat and cooling, and the fire alarms, so we've appropriated $130,000 to finally go and fix those issues. One of the other items that we've appropriated for this year are the school buses. Over the last 5 years, we have created a program for the police where we buy a new police cruiser every year, so that the police are on a 4-year cycle with their new cars. Every year they get a new car, every 4th year that car rolls off. What that allows us to do is to keep our expenses low on the maintenance, and it provides for safer cars and better public service for you. This year we're going to try to do the same thing with the buses. We have 9 buses in town. We spend a significant amount of money on maintenance and repair. We've never been able to fund a purchase cycle for the buses before. This year we're going to lease 7 new buses. We're going to try a leasing program. The idea here is we lease 7 buses on a 3-year lease. In Cohasset, we're lucky because we don't have many roads. Our buses do not accrue a significant amount of mileage. And after 3 years, there's actual value on the buses, and it works well for a lease program. We can't do that with the police cars because, for example, a police car, by the time it rolls off, has over 100,000 miles and it has no value. This is, I believe, the first time the town's ever tried to do a program like this. We expect there'll be a few glitches, but on the whole, the committee thinks that this is the most cost-effective way to fund a bus program for the town. And finally, the one last item we're still working on is the IT master plan. We've spent approximately $700,000 building out the infrastructure for the town IT. That includes wiring for buildings, new computers, new infrastructure. We've come a very, very long way over the last 3 years, and we've made significant project. We anticipate that most of this infrastructure work will be done by the end of the summer. Some of this may move to the fall, but by the end of the year, we should be done with infrastructure. It's a huge achievement. We've been working a long time to get this done, and I think we're finally there. Thank you.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen have voted 5-0 in favor of adoption of this motion, and the Advisory Committee has voted by a vote of 6-0 in favor of adoption. Is there discussion? Sir.
Francis Collins, 404 South Main Street. I have questions on a number of items on here. One, the Bow Street Causeway repairs. I'm not familiar with the causeway on Bow Street. Can someone tell me where that is?
I'll recognize Mr. Keneally.
Jerusalem Road runs through Bow Street. Bow Street's the U, Jerusalem Road's the bottom.
Yeah.
There's an old standing pipe there that feeds the water through.
Are we talking about Jerusalem Road or Bow Street?
It is Jerusalem Road.
Oh, thank you. That's what I thought.
Yes.
All right, thank you. The other question I had is, we're looking for $100,000 for a pump-out boat. I'd like to know what's wrong with the pump-out boat that we have.
The pump-out boat we have, I believe, is 15 years old. I said the same thing. Why are we buying a pump-out boat? Lori, our harbor master, has got a grant for roughly $78,000, so the net cost to the town is approximately $23,000 for a new boat.
The other question I have is on the Osgood School HVAC controls. That has been a problem from day one when that school was built. And I have heard, now I don't have any more kids in school or people that are teaching there, but I heard nothing but complaints about that system. Are we still bailing a leaky boat here, or is this going to be a permanent fix? And why isn't, how much of this is going back to the original people? I'm sure warranty is gone, but my goodness, this has been a very expensive ongoing proposition.
Capital Budget Committee agrees with you. We've gone through the building, we've looked at the units. The way the school was designed, they bought multiple units for the building. So almost every classroom has its own HVAC system with its own set of controls. To remove that system and put 4 or 5 large units on top of that building and run it that way would cost a significant amount of money. We felt that if you were to put an upgrade on the controls with the right control boxes and the right software, that it's the most cost-effective way to get the heating and cooling problems under control. The units themselves, they're 8 to 10 years old, but it's the control units we're replacing, not the HVAC units.
I just want to be sure that we're just not throwing good money after bad.
We believe this will fix the problem.
All right. The other question I have was on the, what are the security cameras for $30,000? What are we taking pictures of now?
The school security cameras are in various stages of working order. There have been really significant improvements in the way security cameras are built. The price has come down, the quality's gone up. Some of the cameras need to be replaced, and this is an appropriation for those cameras.
And the last question I had was that it looked like we wanted to put $30,000 worth of new showers in the fire station. Can you tell me what that's all about?
Yes. We've appropriated approximately $40,000 to $50,000 for the police side. The police side has been renovated. Folks have a chance, I'm sure Chief Quigley would be happy to take you around and take a look. We've appropriated no money for the fire side. This is to go for, one of the things it's going to go for is heating. They have showers on the fire side. Their heater is on the police side. There's a 30 to 40 foot run of hot water from the police side to the fire side. It takes 15 minutes to get hot water. It's the most ineffective way to heat, in our opinion. We appropriate some funds for new water heaters and to reconfigure the way the office space looks in the fire department.
All right, so I mean, to get hot water to the fire station, you put in the circulation loop, but it isn't going to cost you $30,000.
No,
but if there's other money on top of that, then I'll go with it. We just did overhaul that fire station not too many years ago. Maybe it's more than I thought because I was on that committee, so I'm just kind of puzzled why we needed $30,000 for a water heater. But
and I wasn't here for that. I believe most of the money went towards the garage itself for the vehicles. We're actually appropriating funds for the offices and for the areas where the firemen sleep and do their work.
Before we spend $30,000 for a water heater, we ought to think about putting a loop with a circulating pump, which works fine at my house.
Yeah, right. It's not 30 for the water heater.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Ms. McCann?
Agnes McCann, 104 Dome Street. Before I understand the wisdom of spending $75,000 to go to a school bus lease, I would want to know a little bit more detail about what we have now, what the changeover is. Do we own the buses we have? What the cost comparison is? And has the school, this being one of those town school sort of joint activities, has the school weighed in on this idea, or are those all conversations that have already taken place somewhere, or are they going to take place before we spend it? I'm kind of in the dark about this.
We've had significant discussions with the schools over the last 5 months about the bus plan. Originally, the schools came to us and asked for 2 new buses. We went and took a look at the buses. We have a very aged fleet. We have 2 buses that were bought in 2009. 1 bus is 2014, and the rest are 7 to 10 years old. They have issues with maintenance. Our maintenance costs tend to increase dramatically after 3 years. Our maintenance budget is approximately $100,000 a year. Part of the reason we wanted to do the leases on the buses was to manage that maintenance cost. We have worked closely with the schools over this. This is, I can get into a lot of detail, we can go into a little bit of detail, but this has been vetted out. The $75,000 is our best guess of what the lease costs are going to be. We anticipate that, when we put this program together, we're going to have to do some adjustments. They're not going to be large, but we anticipate that we're going to make some adjustments as we get used to leasing buses. We are not the only town on the South Shore that does this. Hingham leases buses. The program works very, very well. They've been doing it for the last 7 or 8 years. We also looked at sharing the cost of owning buses and having them maintained other places, because we have no place to maintain our buses. We have no physical facility to maintain them. They stay outside. If you want to do an oil change, you go into the parking lot, you jack the buses up, and you change the oil. If you have to do something that's more complicated than that, like drop a transmission, you do it out in the parking lot. So we went and looked at some of the other towns that have maintenance facilities. Most of them are unwilling to share with us. Some of it is just management issues, some of it is union work rules. We felt the best solution was to not push ourselves to do things we're not good at, and try to solve the problem through a lease and a turn back.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion? Yes, Mr. Avery.
Richard Avery, 22 Surrey Drive. Quick question. Mr. Kanaile mentioned grants. I think almost $200,000 in grants to offset the listed expenditures. Where does that show up? Because you're asking for, it seems like the full amount from the stabilization fund. Does that flow in later? I'm asking partly because we just allocated $1 million to this fund, and now we're taking almost all of that back out. So I'm just interested in the flow of money in and out.
That's a good question. This is going to get into accounting. The way the accounting works, you have to appropriate the full amount of funds at town meeting, and then you net back the grant money. So the trick here is to keep track of the grant money, and when the grant money is received, it goes back to the pot of money that this all came out of. And we've spent a lot of time this year tracking this and putting controls in place so that we can track the grant money. And Dick Avery's right. We tried to be prudent in our spending this year. I think if you take a look at what we funded, none of it's superfluous. All of it has to be done to maintain the health and safety of the town. There will be an approximate $200,000 net kickback to the capital fund for this. So the outlay for the town will be approximately $720,000.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. The motion under Article 7 does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion under Article 7, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. I think I heard at least one no, but the motion was adopted by the requisite two-thirds vote. Proceed to action on Article 8, Facilities Stabilization Fund Projects. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require a two-thirds vote for adoption. I'll recognize our town manager, Mr. Chris Senior.
Town meeting last year created the Facility Stabilization Fund and placed $100,000 into it, working with Mark Kelly for quite some time on this. These are a list of projects that are in need of attention, which include the library, schools, and some other items. And this would take that money out. Town meeting has to vote to release this money, and Mark is ready to go and his team to get this work done.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen, by a vote of 5-0, has recommended adoption of this motion, and the Advisory Committee, by a vote of 7-0, also recommends adoption. Is there discussion? Very well. We'll proceed to a voice vote on the motion under Article 8. It does require two-thirds vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Proceed to action under Article 9, Funds for Road Repair and Maintenance. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. The motion has been made. Do I have a second? Second. Motion has been seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. The Board of Selectmen has recommended by a vote of 5-0 in favor of adoption, and the Advisory Committee has voted by a vote of 9-0. Did you want to speak? For the Advisory Committee, I'll recognize Mr. Leland Jenkins.
This $150,000 can be used for private ways. And a private way, by definition, is a way that the town is not approved. And the state gives us Chapter 90 funds. Chapter 90 funds can only be used for roads that are town approved. So hopefully, with the $150,000, we can make a real dent in some of our private ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote in the motion on Article 9. It does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion on Article 9, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Proceed to Article 10, Allocation of Funds for a One-Time Cost. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. Does require a majority vote for adoption. Chris, did you want to speak anything on, say anything, so no? Apparently not. The Board of Selectmen has recommended adoption by a vote of 5-0. The Advisory Committee also recommends adoption by a vote of 9-0. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote. Under Article 10, does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted. Article 11, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 91 Liability. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. The motion has been made. Is there a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. For the Board of Selectmen, I'll recognize Ms. Martha Yesterby.
We need a positive vote on this article in order for us to judge the dredging of the harbor and any other water-related issues.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen has recommended adoption by a vote of 5-0. The Advisory Committee has recommended adoption by a vote of 8-0. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote. Motion under Article 11 requires a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted. Article 12, transfer of funds from 1995 dredging appropriation to 2014 dredging project. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. The motion has been made. Is there a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. I'll recognize our town manager, Mr. Chris Senior.
These funds have been recommended for reuse by our harbor master. They're fortunately still available, and they will help to move some boulders and things that are in the channel. Is that my, that will help clear them out and do anything else that will not be covered by the dredging. This will also allow the sand to be moved to Sandy Beach. The Sandy Beach Association is supportive of it and is looking forward to the additional sand on Sandy Beach. This will not take place until the fall, but the work the planning work's begun and the paperwork needs to be done, but the work will not begin until after the season in October and hopefully be completed by December, if that's correct, Brian, yes? December? January? January, so.
Thank you. Forward to the Board of Selectmen, I'll recognize Mr. Fred Coed.
This motion is designed to give the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers everything they need to proceed to dredge sand from the channel into Cohasset Harbor and Inner Harbor down to the elbow opposite the Sailing Club. Originally, the hopper dredge Currituck was proposed to dredge Cohasset Harbor. The Currituck is designed to offload sand offshore. Upon further examination, it was determined that a larger dredge operation was needed that would vacuum pump sand from the harbor onto Sandy Beach. In order to proceed, the town needs to assure the U.S. Army Corps that it has the approval and permission of the Sandy Beach Association to proceed. Now, we know who the Sandy Beach Association is and who is authorized to speak for them, but certifying that to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is another matter. The Town Council has recommended that the easiest way to certify that the town has the proper permission is to authorize the Board of Selectmen to do a friendly temporary taking by eminent domain for the nominal consideration of $1 for the purpose of completing the dredging and the proper spreading of the sand across Sandy Beach per the approved plans of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineering. Secondly, the town had leftover money from a previous dredging project, and this motion will transfer that money into that. Thank you. The Selectmen recommended this 5-0.
Thank you. The Advisory Committee also recommends adoption by a vote of 5-0. I see Dr. Lawrence from the Sandy Beach Association. Would you like to say anything?
Robin Lawrence, 15 Beach Street, speaking on behalf of the Sandy Beach Association. The association for years has been seeking a source of sand, and this is serendipity as far as I can see it. In previous activities, sand was deposited off of the beach and we let wave action take it in. This particular project will allow sand to be pumped directly onto the beach, and I believe it will result in a 2-foot elevation of sand in addition to what we have now, which will then be spread out by bulldozers and make a nice, beautiful beach. And hopefully we'll be protecting that with snow fencing and a variety of other activities. So we are 100% in favor of it, and we do have the documents that the Army Corps needs to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote on the motion on Article 12. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. We'll proceed to action under Article 13, Town Hall Restoration Study. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. The motion has been made. Is there a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. I'll recognize for the Town Hall Restoration and Renovation Committee, Mr. David Farag.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Moderator. David Farag, Chairman of the Cohasset Town Hall Restoration and Renovation Committee. With me up here is Brian Joyce, who will help run the slides, and then he'll take over regarding some of the issues with the building. Back in 2007, town meeting appropriated money for a feasibility study regarding the old town hall portion. As you know, that feasibility study was completed with looking at some of the issues with the exterior and interior regarding that building. Some work was done regarding that, sort of the low-hanging fruit at the time. $300,000 was appropriated after that to restore the windows, pilasters, do some parts of the roof overhang, the things that were the easily obtainable goals that could be done in a fast manner, and those were completed. Going forward, coming into 2012, the committee was reformed, and a new charge was sent from the selectmen regarding the feasibility for town hall going forward. Again, this is 5 years after the fact. We had looked into post in 2007, looking at full restoration, but as you know, during the crash of 2008, funds that were attainable from charities, foundations, and the like simply dried up. So in 2012, the committee was redone with a new charge, as you can see here on the board. The main charge was to bring and goals were to bring the building in compliance with the health and safety codes, which it is not currently now, was to create more energy efficiency in the building, which Brian will get into a little bit later in the presentation, to reorganize the space in the departments to create efficiencies in the town hall. As you know, if you've ever been in it, to see some departments, you're downstairs. To see the same type of department, you've got to go up and around the bend, so the functionality between the two buildings is an issue. To create more functional space for the residents and town hall visitors, which sort of ties into that, and then restore the historic aspects of the elements of the building. During that time, what I'd like to do is send it over to Brian now, who's going to talk about what we found regarding the old end of Town Hall and what we'll call the new section, which was the 1987 section that you walk into as well.
Thank you, David. Brian Joyce, Director of Project Management and Planning. I also live at 362 Beechwood Street. So I'm just going to get, you've seen a lot of these pictures before, the condition of the old town hall, which was constructed 1857 originally, and the one major rehab was in 1929. Can you hear me all right? Shadow puppets. So the old town hall, 1857, renovated. The one major renovation was 1929. The old town hall, there's no existing fire suppression system. It's got a 155-year-old large timber framing. It has a fire alarm system, smoke detectors and such, but that is antiquated as well. There's office egress issues as far as fire goes. The electrical, you can see in the middle picture there. It's an old fuse panel with the glass fuses, and a lot of times we'll be working upstairs, the air conditioner will go off and someone will turn a fan or put a shredder on, and we'll have to go down and find which fuse has burnt out and change it out. The original wiring is in place. There's a lot of knob and tube and some other hodgepodge systems. Some of the wiring's just cut off. You can see a picture there. The plumbing, the restrooms, call them half functional. You go into them and one of the toilets is working, the other one is out of service. The toilet behind the stage is, if you see the tour that is on the cable television, you can see there's a big hole in the floor. It's just completely rotted out. The HVAC system consists of the one thing in the building that's relatively new are the boilers, and that's about 10 to 15 years old. But it's hooked into the old hot water recirc system, and it's inadequate. A lot of the zone valves don't work. For air conditioning, they cut holes through each of the office and put in window units and just through the walls. If you look at the exterior of the old town hall. Open up the windows for fresh air intake. Let's see, and if you walk around the perimeter, you can see a lot of the AC units just dripping down and contributing to the rot. You can see one is growing some vegetation up here.
Just a time check. You're already at 5 minutes.
Okay. me move it along. So, you know, the paint is chipped. The roof the roofing is in need of replacement. If you want to move the slide forward, we'll do the new town hall, which is in an addition from 1987. Advance the slide, please, David. So the new town hall in 1987, we discovered during this process we went through in the past year and a half that through an envelope study that the new town hall, we were calling new town hall 1987, is in worse condition than the actual 155-year-old structure it's attached to. There's a lot of rot. There's you know, the paint's chipped. If we did paint it today, it would only adhere for about 3 to 5 years because of the lack of an air gap between the clapboard and the sheathing. Basically, the entire building, both new and old town hall, need to be stripped completely. And when we looked at the cost of that, we said, why don't we take a look at the building as a whole? We know it doesn't work configuration-wise, so for the amount of money that we're going to spend doing that, let's look at something maybe we can build better. Let's see. I'd encourage everybody to take a look at the Our Town episode. I think it's airing tomorrow at 10 a.m. and 5:30, which goes through a tour from the basement up to the attic of new and old town hall. Advance, please. Yeah. So the part of the study we did in the past year and a half included a BIM model. It's basically a laser scan of the old town hall. It created a 3D model. It's a photorealistic. You can create a photorealistic structure that everyone can see what the design is before you build it. It's a useful tool for estimating, and we're going to be posting. We wanted to do the BIM fly through here, but the file's so large that it wouldn't load up. I didn't want everybody waiting, so we're going to post it on the town website with the report, and I'd encourage everybody to look at that as well. I'll turn it over to David now.
Great. To try and be brief and wrap up for why we're here tonight, we did a full study, as you can see with this slide here. Over the past 16 months, we vetted 13 different designs on the building. We ended up recommending one design to the selectmen and the different boards. But as a part of that process, in beginning to look for design funds, what would possibly be a new town hall, there was some unfinished business regarding locking down the site itself into what a new design could possibly be, or even just a restoration of what we have. And that is what we're here for tonight with the article under number 13, and that is that currently we don't have a full survey regarding the site at Town Hall, which would lock in what the building envelope could be, let alone with any new parking plan. So that the money that we're asking for tonight does go through that, looks for the geotechnical borings, construction methods, adjusting the possible current design that we had with a recommendation, and then also more public meetings to get more public input regarding it, a completion of all the cost analyses that would be done, and then to finalize hopefully what the final plan would be to be brought back through the town boards and then to you at town meeting. Next to last slide here. So the goals that remain, we still have to bring the building up to compliance, because as it was seen when we looked at the old site and then the 1987 portion, the 87 portion was in as worse shape as the old portion. And to put the money back into it when it was designed, we don't want to repeat the same mistakes that happened in 1987. Quite frankly, we shouldn't be here in front of you tonight, because if the building was designed properly, built properly, and maintained properly, we wouldn't be here in the situation that we are today, but nevertheless we are. So in order to move things forward, what would happen is with this $65,000, we would take it, do the site survey, which would lock everything down. The committee would be recharged from the selectmen, and the RFP would go out to do all the things that were listed above. So with that being said, I will take any questions.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen has voted by a vote of 5-0 in favor of this motion, and the Advisory Committee has voted by a vote of 7-0 in favor of adoption. I'll recognize for the Capital Budget Committee, Mr. Jack Kennelly.
Capital Budget Committee recommended 3-0 to recommend the funding of this stage of the project, with a caveat. We're deeply concerned about a town hall project that could conceivably cost $12 million. We don't believe the town can afford a project of this size. And that's one of the reasons why we voted down the appropriation for the construction drawings on the original project. We believe David and the committee and everyone else involved in the project's done a great job. It's not the issue. The issue really is to hit the pause button here for 3 or 4 months and examine what our options are. And we've encouraged David and the selectmen to look at alternatives that maybe people might find unpopular, such as tearing down the buildings. We know that's going to cause political issues, but these are issues that need to be examined before we go ahead and spend $8 to $10 million of the town's money.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Mr. Brown.
Bill Brown, 546 Beecher Street. Have you thought of looking for another site for the town hall and tear off the old section and redo the town hall as a historic building? I know back in '87 when we looked at this, we did look at a building on Route 3A, which is right next to Starbucks Coffee area, and probably still available to be able to buy it. And I think that's around probably $1 to $2 million for a building. And then the other part for tearing down the old part or redoing the old historic building, you can get CPC money for.
I recognize Mr. Farag.
Looking for another site beyond the 4 corners of where Town Hall is located was not in our charge. However, I would say that other than I don't know of any other land in town that the town currently owns. And then again, as you said, there would be a land acquisition cost to looking at another site in town. So I don't know if that's going to necessarily drive down the cost if you have to have land acquisition. But to suffice to say, it wasn't in our charge. We were looking at the lot that is currently where the town hall is situated right now.
Thank you. Mr. Brown again.
Just a follow-up. Can you make it part of your charge, or can the selectmen give you the charge to go back and look and see if there's other areas that might be a better fit for a town hall versus where we are now?
Mr. Coed.
We didn't have a discussion of this, but I think the board is open to looking at additional options and studying everything that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion under Article 13, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted by the requisite 2/3 vote. Before proceeding to action on Article 14, I'd like to recognize Ms. Diane Kennedy for a proclamation.
Good evening. Whereas Peter J. DiCaprio was appointed to the Water Commission in 2010 and elected in 2011 and has served on the board with honor and distinction for 4 years. And whereas, as a member of the Water Commission, Peter DiCaprio has helped the board discharge its responsibilities in a very effective and efficient manner, especially in the area of finances, the completion of the cell and emergency communication antenna installations on the Bear Hill tank, and the general management of the Cohasset Water Department. And whereas Peter DiCaprio has also served his community with distinction on both the Capital Budget Committee from 2006 and the Water Planning Group in 2010. And whereas, as a member of the aforementioned boards, Peter DiCaprio has brought great wisdom to the many issues that face our community. And whereas, such dedication and service to the town cannot come without great sacrifice to personal matters and family life. And now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Board of Selectmen, and the town of Cohasset, on the occasion of his completing his time with the Water Department, acknowledge on behalf of all those he has productively served, his diligence to the duties of his elected office, and his constant and energetic pursuit of all its requirements, given under our hands and the seal of the town of Cohasset on this 28th day of April in the year 2014, the Cohasset Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. For the record, all those in favor of the proclamation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. DiCaprio. We'll proceed to action on Article 14, additional real estate exemptions. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. The Board of Selectmen has voted by a vote of 5-0 in favor of action under this motion, and the Advisory Committee has voted by a vote of 7-0 in favor of this motion. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion under Article 14, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Article 15, establishment of a stabilization fund for the South Shore Regional School District. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. The Board of Selectmen by a vote of 5-0 and the Advisory Committee by a vote of 5-3 have both recommended in favor of adoption. Is there discussion? Mr. Collins.
Francis Collins, 404 South Main Street. Can you please tell me what the South Shore Regional School District is?
I'll recognize Mr. Coed.
It's the vocational technical school.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I thought it was, but it doesn't say so in the article here.
Thank you. Are there further discussion? Is there further discussion? We'll proceed to a vote under Article 15. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted. Article 16, fiscal year 2015 community preservation projects. There are 7 separate recommendations under this article. They're lettered A through G. The Advisory Committee and the Board of Selectmen have each unanimously recommended adoption of recommendations A through E and G, so all but F as in Foxtrot. Both the Board of Selectmen also recommended in favor of recommendation F, Foxtrot, by a vote of 4-0 with 1 abstention, and the Advisory Committee recommended adoption of recommendation F by a vote of 5-3 with 1 abstention. In the interest of time, I would like to consider all 7 recommendations as a package. However, because of the vote was split and was less than unanimous in favor of recommendation F, if there are any voters that would like recommendation F considered separately, please stand. If at least 7 of you stand, we'll consider recommendation F separately. Otherwise, we'll proceed to discuss and vote on all 7 of them as a package. Nobody has stood, so we'll proceed with a motion that includes all 7 recommendations. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. Again, it does include recommendations A through G in one motion. It requires a majority vote for adoption. For the Community Preservation Committee, I'll recognize Mr. Russ Benetti.
Good evening. Thanks for attending, and thank you more for putting this under one vote. The first 3 things under recommendation A are statutory requirements where we have to set aside 10% of our income into the 3 categories that we fund projects under. The rest of it, we're giving a $50,000 grant to the Historic Commission to redo the pavilion at on Lawrence Wharf, another $11,000 to do signage and some landscaping, and that's to through the Historic. $175,000 will go to the purchase of a conservation restriction. Conservation restrictions run for the rest of the time, and they are following the title of the property. So if that property were ever change hands for whatever reason, the preservation restriction would go with it. This is a enlargement of the Ingram Park and has been well received by everybody. We also have in there an appropriation of $25,000 for our administrative expenses. In the past, CPC had the town pay their legal expenses and everything. So you've been paying twice for it, in a sense, as a taxpayer, and we've taken on those bills. Last year, we put aside $25,000. We spent about $3,000. And the rest of it goes back into the general fund. And that is pretty much the whole thing. Any questions?
Thank you. I did give the recommendations of the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee earlier. Is there any discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. I did indicate before that it's a majority vote. That was incorrect. This is a 2/3 vote for this motion under Article 16, and again, it's all 7 recommendations lettered A through G. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted by the requisite 2/3 vote. We'll proceed to action on Article 17, Community Preservation Committee, Fiscal Year 2014 Appropriation for Community Housing Reserve. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? The motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. For the Community Preservation Committee, I'll again recognize Mr. Respinetti.
This will be quicker than the last one. We should have had this $10,000 would have been put in last year. We had more cash come in from the state, so we hadn't met our 10% set aside, and this makes the 10% set aside. Thank you.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen has recommended adoption by a vote of 5-0. The Advisory Committee has recommended adoption by a vote of 7-0. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a vote under Article 17. All those in favor of the motion under Article 17, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Article 18, Transfer from Water Capital Stabilization Fund. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. I'll recognize from the Water Commission, Mr. Peter DiCaprio. He does not have anything to say unless there's questions. The Water Commission has recommended adoption. The Board of Selectmen by a vote of 5-0 has recommended adoption, and the Advisory Committee by a vote of 6-0 has recommended adoption. Is there any discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote under Article 18. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Article 19. Your packet indicates that this was intended to be indefinitely postponed, but in fact, as I understand it, the Sewer Commission would like to proceed with a substantive motion on this. I've been given the motion. I'll read aloud the motion I've been given. If for some reason I don't have it right, will someone on the Sewer Commission please correct me? The motion will read as follows, and then I'll reading you the motion, and then I'll ask if somebody wants to move it. The motion would read, moved that $50,000, and actually, let me interrupt for myself for 1 second. The bulk of the text of this is under Article 19 from your warrant. So if you follow along with Article 19 from your warrant, you'll see that essentially what they're doing is making some updated wording changes to turn that paragraph into an actual motion. Much of the text you'll recognize. Their proposed motion reads, moved that $50,000 be appropriated to be expended jointly by the Sewer Commission and the town manager following a competitive procurement process to assess and update planning of wastewater facility needs within the town to address environmental and public health concerns, including protection of public water supplies and protection of water resources, including but not limited to Cohasset Cove and Harbor. And to meet this appropriation, $50,000 be raised and appropriated from the fiscal 15 tax levy and other general revenues of the town. Let me read that to you one more time. Moved that $50,000 be appropriated to be expended jointly by the Sewer Commission and the town manager following a competitive procurement process to assess and update planning of wastewater facility needs within the town, to address environmental and public health concerns, including protection of public water supplies and protection of water resources, including but not limited to Cohasset, Cove, and Harbor. And to meet this appropriation, $50,000 be raised and appropriated from fiscal year 15 tax levy and other general revenues of the town. Are there any questions on the wording of the motion? May I have such a motion? Thank you. The motion has been made. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Does require a majority vote for adoption. For the Sewer Commission, is Mr. Baldwin here? I'll recognize Mr. Brian Baldwin.
Good evening. I'm Brian Baldwin. I'm the chair of the Board of Sewer Commissioners, and I'm pleased to be here tonight. Just wanted to give you a little bit of explanation of why we're bringing this forward to you. For those of you who are faithful attendees at town meeting, you might have seen this before. This actually was brought up at the special town meeting in 2012. So why are we looking at this again? Originally, this was proposed by town council. And the reason being is that the judgment, which you are all familiar with, is we've been under for 34 years with the Commonwealth to complete our sewering requirements in town, was coming to an end. At least we foresee the end of it, and we still foresee the end of it shortly. And so at the time, town council recommended that we bring this forward to better protect ourselves from some of the capacity that we have in the system should a developer want to come into town and possibly try to challenge that capacity and take it for their use. And we want to make sure that the town controls that capacity rather than any individual landowner. The home rule petition that you might remember was passed in 2013 was again legislation that was approved by town meeting and then went to the state legislature and was approved to once again give the town full control, is kind of a belts and suspenders above and beyond the current state laws to manage its own affairs and its capacity utilization. So at special town meeting 2012, Article 11, there was an authorization to expend up to $50,000, and it was actually appropriated from the Sewer Enterprise Fund. So the reason why we're here tonight is we feel that that was an error. That was proposed at that time that the sewer users, the ratepayers, would be paying in 100% the cost to do a study to serve the rest of the town, which we felt was an undue burden, that this is actually what to do with the capacity in town and future use of sewer in town should be, it's a town issue and it should be borne entirely by the town residents. Now the town residents that are sewer users and ratepayers would obviously have to pay a portion of it, but that'd be kind of splitting hairs if we couldn't really allocate the cost just to the non-sewer users. So our proposal is to actually get this funded by from the general fund. So one of the questions is, why are we, what's the issue here about the study? So, next slide. Right now, the wastewater treatment plant, we are licensed to process 450,000 gallons a day, and that's a rolling average over the year. So that's what we are licensed to process at the plant. In the last month, we actually processed 281,000 gallons a day. So you can see there's a pretty good variance between what we're actually processing and what we're actually licensed to process. So the question is, what do you do with that? So the question really is, the study is going to be looking at what might we do with this capacity, and then the question of what should we do with the capacity gets brought back to town meeting, because the three sewer commissioners don't decide what we're going to do with that capacity. That authorization is 100% under the auspices of town meeting. So what we're going to do is a comprehensive wastewater management plan. So the state has a plan, it's like a framework, if you will, that most communities use. And we've gotten examples of these wastewater management plans from similar coastal communities: Falmouth, Barnstable, Chatham, Wellfleet and whatnot. And they use this document. So I'm just going to read you a little bit of the frontispiece so you can understand what this is about. Planning for wastewater treatment and disposal facilities is a critical challenge for each community. Such facilities are inextricably linked to protection of public health, protection of water resources, and comprehensive growth and development plans. It is therefore important that decisions made on planning, design, construction, and maintenance of wastewater facilities be the most environmentally sound and the most cost-effective. Comprehensive wastewater management planning must also reflect the collective input of citizens, local officials, and other interested stakeholders. So that's one of the things that they stress very much. This is an open, transparent process. There's a lot of public forums and workshops. So once again, this is not 3 individuals that you've voted to manage your plant, the operations of your plant, but this is a town-wide kind of look at what is the best way to use the capacity that we have.
Just a time check, you're right at 5 minutes.
Yes. So it's also, I want to just reinforce that it's a 20-year perspective that they're looking at. This is what's proposed. Next slide. So right now we have the RFPs in process. We're going to competitively bid this work to some large engineering firms. We don't have to put it out in to all comers, if you will, from a state procurement process. Because it's engineering services, we can actually selectively bid it to who we feel is best qualified. So we're going to be looking at some of the large players in this marketplace, people who have done work for Hingham and Wellfleet and Chatham and whatnot. Some of these firms that actually have done work for us on the wastewater and on the treatment plant as well, for the drinking water plant. So we're going to do that. We're preparing the RFP this summer. We're looking to get the work started sometime after Labor Day, and we're seeking funding for $50,000. We're going to structure this to work towards a budget and see where we can get with this, that $50,000, which we feel we can do much of the work. It may not do all the work. We may have to come back at a special town meeting if we feel that we need to do some work on that. So that's it. Any questions anybody might have?
Thank you. For the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Steve Gomer. Thank you, Mr. Mullen.
The Board of Selectmen voted 4-0 with 1 abstention for this. 3 simple notes, if I may. As Brian Baldwin just pointed out, the sewer capacity that we have is one of the strongest, if you will, assets that the town possesses. Proper allocation not only has an impact on health and safety, but it also has an impact on our potential development. As you saw earlier tonight, 85% of our tax base is your homes. Often what limits the development of your home is the septic system that you have or your ability to hook up to sewer, because that can create the capability to truly develop the property to the extent possible. Having said that, health and safety weighs first. We have many homes that are still on septic systems, some of them potentially failing, that are near or adjacent to our own water resources. It is incumbent upon us as stewards of this asset to make certain that we're properly allocating such a precious resource. This article had come before us previously from the Sewer Commission for our consideration. At that point, about 3 weeks ago, the Sewer Commission pointed out that they did not believe that they were prepared to go forward based upon what they had estimated the cost to be. In the succeeding 3 weeks, until yesterday, I suppose, they firmed up that in fact the $50,000 amount previously mentioned was appropriate and would be sufficient to go forward for a bid. The town is not required to accept any bid that comes forward, only those that it believes fit its parameters. So the town is protected from that perspective, and for that reason, the board recommends 4-0 that you move on this article.
Thank you. And the advisory committee has voted by a vote of 3-2 in favor of this motion. Is there discussion? Sir.
Jack Creighton, 23 Cushing Road. I urge everybody to support this motion. The, in my role in town government, we have seen issues come up which are indirectly related to sewer capacity and the correct allocation of that capacity. And we've noticed that it will have a profound impact on the character of our town. There will be issues like protecting water supplies, protecting the integrity of the natural resources. In order to do this, comprehensive, forward-looking, good government planning, I think, is very important. And I really congratulate the Sewer Commission for moving forward on this, and I urge my fellow townspeople to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote on the motion under Article 19. It is the motion I read earlier. Would anyone like it read again? We'll proceed to a voice vote. It does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted. We'll proceed to Article 20, Sewer Districts Bylaw. Before asking for the motion, there are two typographical errors I've been asked to correct for you in the, they're actually in the warrant. You'll see the motion in your motion packet references the text in the warrant. So if you have the warrant with you, on page 12 of the warrant, there are minor typos. The first one is under Section 1 definitions. The first definition is act. The last line reads, the same may be amended, and that should be from time to time. So the O and the R are transposed. It should be from. And then farther down on the page, fourth line from the bottom, subparagraph A reads, Central Cohasset Sewer District, 450,000 gallons per day, paren average. That should be daily flow. It now reads average monthly flow. It should be average daily flow. So those are the two typographical errors that need correcting. With those corrections, may I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. For the Sewer Commission, I'll again recognize Mr. Brian Baldwin.
Once again, a little history here. This was something that was proposed by Town Council, which we are thankful for, keeping a lookout for our interests. This is basically completing the implementation of the Home Rule petition, which is affecting the Enabling Act for the Sewer Commission through the state legislatures. Basically, you heard Town Manager talk about the development of the GIS system, and this would be doing the same thing. It's just creating district maps that can be as a layer of that GIS system, so that when we're looking at the water districts and the sewer districts and a lot of other information about the city, the town, you can look at it in one place. I'm just going to show the next slide. And I show this on some boards out in the lobby for those who got a chance to see that. We have various ways that we're defining the districts, and it's very confusing. They're very diagrammatic, as you can see. There's kind of the orange texted area up there. So it splits properties. It's not very specific, and it leaves a lot of room for interpretation and maybe misinterpretation, which often leads to litigation, which of course Town Council might like to see, but we certainly want to try to avoid that at all costs. So if we look at the next slide, this is looking at what we're proposing to do is define the districts by lot. So it's very, very specific what property's in and what property's out. So we're not bisecting any. We're also not leaving this to an interpretation of a small group, but town meeting is the only, has the only authority to establish sewer districts. So we feel this is an updating of the existing sewer districts, which everyone I think seems to feel is prudent to do. And that's why we need your vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen, by a vote of 5-0, and the Advisory Committee, by a vote of 7-0, recommends adoption of this motion. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote on the motion under Article 20. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. Article 21, reauthorization of intermunicipal agreement with South Shore Recycling Cooperative. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Second. Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. The Board of Selectmen by a vote of 5-0 and the Advisory Committee by a vote of 8-0 recommend adoption of this motion. Is there any discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote on Article 21. All those in favor of the motion on Article 21, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. It is exactly 9 o'clock. I'm feeling very good about the progress we've made and the pace we're on, so I think we're looking good to be able to finish tonight. I'd like to give everyone a 5-minute quick break just to stand and stretch your legs. Don't stretch them too far, please, because we do need a quorum to keep conducting business, but we'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you all for staying. I'd like to ask everyone if you would please move back to your seats and we can get going again. Please return to your seats and we can reconvene and reconduct our business. We will reconvene and take up Article 22. There is a little complexity on this article, so I would ask you to please take your seats so we can keep it straight and keep moving. We will proceed to action under Article 22, amendments to Cohasset's bylaws. We do anticipate that an amendment will be proposed on the original motion, but we will first hear the recommendation of the Board of Selectmen and the Advisory Committee, and then we will open up the floor, at which point we may have an amendment. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Second. The motion has been made and seconded. It does refer to amending the amendments as set forth in Article 22 of the warrant, so you may want to find the warrant and find Article 22 so you can follow along. It does require a majority vote for adoption. For the Board of Selectmen, I'll recognize Mr. Steve Gomer.
The Board of Selectmen voted 4-0 with 1 abstention to town meeting adopt this article. We had listened and had the pleasure of working with the Governance Committee, who had entertained a number of questions in attempting to true up our own bylaws and those that are set forth in the Town Manager Act. We had, as I said, come to the conclusion after several discussions with the committee that we could, we voted for this article 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. And for the Advisory Committee, Mr. Peter Piscator.
The Advisory Committee voted 3-2 not to recommend, but it wasn't on content. We were advised that there was amendments coming, and the board felt that they couldn't vote on affirmative on this thing until they saw the amendments. So it was more of a technical vote than a content vote. So we're waiting to hear the amendments.
Thank you. And I understand the Bylaw Committee has reviewed the text of the proposed amendments. Is there discussion? Mr. Dormitzer.
Good evening. I'm Ralph Dormitzer, and I'm representing the Governance Committee this evening. I would refer you initially to Article 22. It's page 14 on your warrant. And I'm going to be speaking only in this amendment to item E at the bottom of the page. The amendment is as follows. I move to amend the main motion under Article 22, subsection E, by striking some of the verbiage, and we'll talk about exactly what it is, and then amending that according to what you see, I hope you see, on the screen in back of you. If you're looking at the article itself, it should be possible to actually follow what we're talking about. So what we intend to do, or in this amendment,
Excuse me, one second, if you don't mind, let me just read for them the changes, and then you can make the discussion, is it?
okay,
fair?
want me to do, okay.
So what he's proposing, for those of you who can't see the screen, they propose in the second sentence to change the word may to shall. At the farther along in that sentence, again at the bottom of page 14, to strike the slash or, so the and or would become and then they've added a new sentence at the just before the last sentence, which would read, the committee shall have an odd number of members and shall be composed of a minimum of 7, but no more than 9 individuals. Is everybody clear on their proposed amendment?
May I proceed with the commentary, Mr. Moderator?
Absolutely. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. Mr. Dormitzer.
The bylaw amendment that you have before you is to correct what we believe is a serious omission in Article 22, the bylaw article, submitted by the Governance Committee, but modified by the Selectmen. What the amendment simply requires is that the Selectmen appoint a search committee made up of between 7 and 9 town residents to assist in the selection of candidates for the position of town manager. It fulfills the obligation created by the new Town Manager Act that the Selectmen, and I quote, create a search committee to assist in the selection of candidates for the position of town manager. End of the quote. This amendment therefore restores the obligation that the Selectmen seek the assistance of a search committee made up of town residents. The Selectmen's revised language in Article 22 specifically removed that obligation and made it discretionary. Since the intent of our new Town Manager Act is that the search committee be made up of Cohasset residents, it was, in my view and our view, a misinterpretation of that intent to make it a discretionary provision. We also believe it to be in keeping with a long-standing precedent that the inclusion of members of the community be available to assist the Selectmen in screening applicants, recognizing also that the decision on the candidate is the Selectmen's and theirs alone. It is also good governance that the town take advantage of the talent and capabilities of residents by using committees and subcommittees to add value in the deliberation on multiple topics and for the benefit of the elected decision makers has been our long-standing practice. You will hear tonight criticism of this amendment by Selectmen and others that it limits the flexibility of the Selectmen to conduct a search as they deem most desirable. And they will cite the selection of the current town manager and its success through the use of the Collins Center as an example. The amendment, however, in no way constrains their use of the Collins Center, either as a support to the search committee and or as a direct consultant to the Selectmen. Nor does it preclude any process that they choose that improves the selection process itself or to determine the scope and term of the search committee. The Selectmen have complete freedom to conduct the search as they wish, except for the requirement that a search committee of town residents be included in the process. We further propose that the inclusion of a search committee furthers the goal of the Selectmen to increase meaningful transparency in government. With regard to the details, the Selectmen, in their alteration of Article 22, the bylaw, and I quote, the Selectmen may solicit town residents for the committee and or choose to employ professional consultants to work in tandem or independently in the same function. That's the quote. And that's the original article, not the modification. You'll note that the Selectmen added the word may instead of shall with regard to resident participation and added the conjunction "or with respect to employing consultants in place of a search committee," so as to make the use of a search committee optional. In addition, the selectmen deleted the requirement that there be any specific number of residents on a search committee. So a search committee can be construed to be one person, as Robert's Rules of Order define a committee as one or more people. Consider the following as a result of these ill-advised alterations to the bylaw. It would be entirely legal under these changes for the selectmen with a majority of just 3 members to select one of their own or even a resident of, for example, another town as the only search committee member, and to select the town manager by the same 3 members. Ironically, since our new Town Manager Act deleted the prohibition in the previous act,
Just a time check, you're at 5 minutes.
probably 3 more minutes for me, that's about it. That
Why
ironically,
don't we
since our
take
new
care of it
Town
in less
Manager
than 3
Act
minutes,
deleted the
please?
prohibition that no elected or appointed official be selected as town manager except the selectmen, it also opened the possibility of insider favoritism by the same 3 members of the Board of Selectmen, as was feared when the original prohibition was inserted in 1987. Bottom line, we urge you therefore to vote yes on this amendment to Article 22 and to vote yes on the main motion under Article 22. Should you vote no on this amendment, we urge you to vote no on Article 22. Article 27, still coming up, the citizens' petition that follows, contains the original language proposed by the Governance Committee, including, in addition to the Search Committee language, the creation of a standing budget planning committee instead of the current ad hoc budget planning committee. So you'll have a second bite at the apple if necessary. Again, we urge you to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So procedurally, they've proposed an amendment to the pending motion. We will discuss and then vote on the amendment. The amendment will either pass or fail, and then we will proceed to a vote on the main motion, either with the original language if the amendment fails, or with the amended language if the amendment passes. So there will be, no matter which way it comes out, there will be 2 votes. First on the amendment itself, which will not adopt anything, it will just amend the motion. Everybody good with that? Is there discussion? Mr. Gomer.
I noted previously that the selectmen had voted 4-0-1 in favor of the amendment. However, in favor of the article. I want to clarify that that's not in favor of the amendment. The selectmen have viewed this amendment now, just as you have, for the first time. You heard Mr. Dormitzer point out that the selectmen may attempt to defend the approach. I got to tell you, this last year is a year of my life I'll never get back. And that's saying something. We proceeded to choose a town manager this past year in a very unusual fashion because the board itself couldn't agree, but the board itself recognized that it needed to make progress and took the steps to do so. If the board had a choice or a range of choices, the board would consistently choose for the range of choices. I think that's natural. We can't make a statement with regard to this amendment to the motion tonight because, frankly, we haven't had time to consider it, and to do so would be a breach of the trust with you for due process and due consideration. I have to say you'd have to vote your hearts in this one.
Thank you. For the advisory committee, I'll recognize Mr. Peter Pescator.
The advisory committee just had a quick huddle and a vote. We did have the amendment prior to the meeting tonight, so everybody was familiar with it. We think that the vote was 7-1 to approve the amendment because we think it gives the selectmen adequate flexibility in their choice of process while it does give the town some protections in the structure of a search committee. So again, the vote was 7-1 for. Thank you.
I'll recognize Ms. Kennedy.
Excuse me. The Board of Selectmen did have a bite at this apple when we first received the Governance Committee recommendations for bylaw changes. This was much more substantive, included a budget planning group and other things. We deliberated and discussed long and hard about what we felt we could put forward in front of town meeting as something that we could, for the most part, get behind. I have had concerns over the past couple of weeks with the article, the way we approved it, because we had an and/or in there. And an and/or isn't a very nice, friendly legal word. And I was very concerned that if the choice were and/or solicit residents for a committee, or we decided to and/or may choose to employ a professional consultant, we may just choose to employ a professional consultant and not put together a committee. The Town Manager Act, which is now state law, is that first line under E, the Board of Selectmen shall create a search committee to assist in the selection of candidates for the position of town manager. I urge you to vote positively on this amendment. I think it does what the intent was to form a committee of citizens. I feel very confident that we were successful in our hire for town manager, and none of us will see this come to pass. However, these words are something that's going to have to live in our town bylaws, and I think the intent is to have citizen participation in hiring. The way we hired this year was not ideal. We put it off to a consultant picked the finalists, and there was no input until the interview process. I do think there should be input, and I think you should vote positively for the amendment.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Dick.
Mike Dick, 27 Parker Ave. I have a question for Town Council. On the wording that changes and/or to the word and, am I right on that? And? The selectmen shall solicit town residents for the committee and choose to employ professional consultants. So is that a requirement, therefore, if we pass an amendment, that the selectmen will put together a search committee and hire a consultant? Or do they have flexibility?
The word is may.
Didn't we strike may and insert shall? I see. Thank you.
Ronnie McMorris, 89 Doan Street. I think this amendment should be defeated as a matter of principle and as a matter of good governance. I think it is extremely poor policy to be amending bylaws for town meetings. People say what words are being used, what words are being used. This is no way town, and I Board of Selectmen and give I think this is very governance. In terms of what the intention here is, we've heard varying things about whether it gives the selectmen flexibility or whether it doesn't. I think it's very clear when you are requiring your Board of Selectmen to do something that you are taking the flexibility away from them. We saw this year a unique situation, or maybe not a unique situation, but our elected officials should have the flexibility to decide, as our elected officials, what is in the best interest of the town and not have their hands tied. And I urge everyone to vote no on this amendment.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Yes.
Trish Morse, 78 Forest Avenue. I'd like to respond to Mrs. McMorris's comment. I believe that it's part of our history of town meeting that amendments typically can be and should be brought to the floor when
Please be sure to address the meeting, Madam President.
Elm Street, I am very, very confused. I elect a board of manager. Yes, there should be a committee formed that has the citizens there, but they also should go to people that understand the laws of who should be members of this to advise them. I don't think that we should push for one particular thing over the other, but leave it to the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you. Ms. McCann?
Agnes McCann, 104 Doan Street. Twice a reference by supporters of this amendment that the Town Manager Act requires a citizens committee, and I just want to say that that's not so. The Town Manager Act, which doesn't have a spirit, it's law, it's words that state the law, and it says that the Board of Selectmen shall create a search committee to assist in the selection of candidates for the position of town manager. Presumably it's to assist the selectmen, and it gives them complete flexibility in whether they want to consider a citizen committee or whether they need to hire an outdoor consultant. Why wouldn't they think of citizens first, you might think, but to say that it requires a citizen committee is simply not the case. And I would urge you to defeat this amendment.
Thank you. I'd recognize Ms. Quigley first, and then I guess I have Mr. DiCaprio and Mr. Kennelly.
The purpose in changing the words to may and or were to allow a future Board of Selectmen to have the same flexibility and choice that this board did have. Mr. Gomer spoke to it and Mrs. Kennedy spoke to it. We have been advised by Town Council that those words, making shall and are very restrictive and will not allow a future Board of Selectmen the same flexibility that this Board of Selectmen. None of us hopes that we will have the same set of circumstances that we had in town government at this time. But should the circumstances require that politics be taken out of the choice of the individual who is going to, our chief operating executive, then a future board should have that option. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd recognize Mr. DiCaprio.
Peter DiCaprio, 555 Jerusalem Road. My question is for town council. Earlier, a commenter said that town meeting is not the place to amend bylaws. I'm reading Article 20, Sewer District Bylaw. It says, moved that the town of Cohasset general bylaws be amended. So when we voted on Article 20, did we not vote to amend the town bylaw? And how is that different from what we're being asked to do here?
I'll recognize our town council, Mr. Paul DeRenzis.
The rules of town meeting and the general laws of the Commonwealth permit amendments to be made to motions. That's the process.
Or no? I think Ms. McMorris had raised the issue of amending the motion, not amending the bylaws. I think that's correct, is that Ms. McMorris, for you? Yes.
The rules also permit amending motions.
Yes, that's correct, they do.
What the law doesn't say, it doesn't speak to the wisdom of doing so. It speaks that you have the right to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Kennelly?
Jack Kennelly, 46 Black Rock Road. I'm a member of the Governance Committee. I was also involved in drafting the changes to the Town Manager Act. And one of the large debates we had in that committee was the difference between the words shall and may. And it's clear in the law, shall means you shall do something, may means you may do something. It's a choice. The other point I want to make is that the Town Manager Act is a state law. It trumps bylaws. If we were to get in a situation where somebody didn't like the fact that we did not create a search committee, they'd be in violation of the state law and we could potentially be sued. The whole intent of the Town Manager Act was to draft the skeleton, the law, and allow the town to negotiate the bylaws at town meeting. That was the spirit of the way the Town Manager Act was negotiated in the first place. We anticipated that we would be able to move through the bylaws quickly and fix some of the issues that are still exist in our bylaws. Our bylaws, there are a lot of issues with the bylaws, and it's going to take a while to get that straightened out. We never anticipated that we would have these kind of issues getting these simple changes made to reflect the intent of the Town Manager Act.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment? Sure. Ms. Mooney from the front, and then Mr. Pease.
Linda Mooney, 124 Lamberts Lane. I just want to relate our history as well. We had the same problem with the words shall versus may, and that created a lot of debate. I'm speaking personally, not on behalf of the advisory committee, however. I just want to point out that this article as amended doesn't take away the selectmen's authority. The final say in the selection process of a town manager will remain with the Board of Selectmen. This just makes the process more transparent in my view. It allows more members to speak, maybe a more diverse body of the town, but it is not binding. We have not taken away the authority, or this will not take away the authority of the Board of Selectmen to have the final say and the final vote.
Thank you. Mr. Pease?
Sam Pease, 3 Sankey Road. Look, it seems to come down to one thing. The selectmen may or the selectmen shall. Which one is in concurrence with the Town Manager Act? Are they both in concurrence with the Town Manager Act and we're splitting hairs? Or is one or the other in concurrence with the Town Manager Act and therefore we should use it? If shall is in concurrence with the Town Manager Act and we have to use it, then we don't have a debate. Is that true?
Mr. DeRenzis, would you be able to respond to that? I think the question is, are both or only one of these formulations consistent with the town manager, meaning, I think, permitted by the Town Manager Act?
The Town Manager Act does not say whether there's the search committee has to be a citizen committee or not. What you're deciding here is to go beyond the language of the Town Manager Act to decide a citizen committee or not.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Pease? Is there further discussion on the amendment? Again, we're going to have two votes. We're going to vote on the amendment, and then whether it passes or not, we're going to be going back to the main motion, either amended or not. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Very well, proceed to a voice vote on the amendment. It does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. No. The amendment is passed by a majority vote. We'll now proceed to further discussion. All right, we have, please stand if you doubt. It looks like we have 7 people, more than 7, doubting the count. So let's let the tellers take your stations, please. The voting procedure is going to be, you're going to be holding up, don't bother doing it yet till they get to the stations, but I'm going to first call for the affirmative votes, and you'll hold up your red piece of paper, slip of paper, and they'll tally. And then we will also, after they've tallied that, we will have them take the negatives. No, we're not voting yet. You guys are all square, and Mr. Higginson, you're going back, and Mrs. Higginson, you're coming forward, right? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by holding your red cards up in the air, please. Keep them up, keep them up. They've got a big room to count. There, we've got up in the front, and then Betts, you've got the bleacher behind you. Okay, keep them up just for a couple more seconds till they get the full count. Okay, tellers, you're good? Okay. Hands down on the affirmatives. All those opposed, please signify by holding your red slip of paper up in the air, please. You got 2 up at the front. Keep him up in the back because he's still counting back there. count is in favor 87, opposed 62. The amendment does pass. We will now proceed to further debate on the main motion. That was just the amendment. Is there further debate on the main motion? Yes.
Hi, Katie Dugan, 100 Black Rock Road. I've watched the budget development and watched the fiscal 5-year plan development this year quite closely. A question for the selectmen. Based on all the comments and specifically referencing what the advisory committee discussed at the beginning of this meeting about the concerns in the medium term about revenue and cost lines crossing, why did the selectmen not feel comfortable adopting language in Article 22 that would put in place a permanent long-range planning committee at this point?
For the Board of Selectmen, I recognize Mr. Steve Gomer.
The Board of Selectmen selected each of these items for discussion. With regard to the recommendation by the Governance Committee to establish a standing long-range planning committee, the board voted 3-2 against that recommendation. While the discussion was lively, the board as a whole made the vote, even though the vote itself was split. There is no doubt, coming from that discussion, that the board recognizes both the need and the desirability of long-range financial planning. The board has witnessed on its own over the past several years the success that it's experienced from that. However, as you probably have noted in the written word and watching the Tuesday Night Follies, that we have some difficulty reaching agreement from time to time as to how that's going to be executed. This is an example of that.
Thank you. Is there, yes, Mr. McMorris.
David McMorris, 89 Down Street. First, I have a point of information, I think probably for town council, on drafting. On page 15, under amending Article 4, appointed town officers, there's police chief, fire chief, and director of finance. And then, for example, under police chief, it says, shall appoint upon merit and fitness and may remove, comma, the police chief subject to. Does this mean that the selectmen's approval by majority vote applies to both appointment and removal?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question again?
Yes. Well, the simple question is, does the selectmen's approval by majority vote apply to both the appointment and the removal of the officer under the police, fire, and finance director?
Is your question whether the selectmen's approval is required for both appointing and removing?
Yes.
Mr. Dorenzis, would you be, I believe the question is the selectmen's approval required for both appointing and removing? He says he believes they have the right to veto both, so I think that means yes. Is that correct? Okay, he's going to check a copy of the Town Manager Act to confirm.
Okay, I guess part of the question is with drafting. If you look at the second item with the fire chief, there's no comma after remove, and I wonder if that changes the effect of the language there.
His response was does not change.
Shouldn't it be consistent between each?
His answer was sure.
Well, it's not just a grammatical thing. I think generally in legal drafting, commas count because they do define what a clause applies to and what it doesn't apply to. Thank you.
Would you like to propose an amendment?
I'd like to know exactly what it means. Without reference to the Town Manager Act, shouldn't the drafting here be clear as to what the intent is? I mean, why should we have to guess?
Was that a rhetorical question or a?
Well, I'll offer an amendment, okay? For each of those three, the town manager shall appoint upon merit and fitness alone, comma, subject to the selectmen's approval by majority vote of its full membership pursuant to 5D of the Town Manager Act, comma, and may remove, comma, and then the remainder of the clause. And each of the A for the police chief, A for the fire chief, A for the director of finance, town accountant.
Give me 1 sec to write down what I think you just said, and I'll read it back to you. I'm sorry, did you want the phrase, read the phrase one more time, if you please.
The town manager shall appoint upon merit and fitness alone, comma, subject to the selectmen's approval by majority vote of its full membership pursuant to Section 5D of the Town Manager Act, comma, and may remove, comma, the police chief, subject to the selectmen's approval by majority vote of its full membership pursuant to Section 5D of the Town Manager Act, and then the same amendments for both the fire chief and director of finance, town accountant.
Okay, thank you. So he has moved to amend each of those three sections so that he would add after the first word alone the phrase subject to the selectmen's approval by majority vote of its full membership pursuant to Section 5D of the Town Manager Act, comma. And then I take it in the police chief, you would also add a comma after the remove?
Yes.
He has made his motion. Does everybody understand it? Is that a no? The motion is to add language to each of, this is on page 15 of the warrant. There's 3 paragraphs. The first one under the first boldface type has to do with the police chief. The second one under the boldface type has to do with fire chief. The third one has to do with director of finance, town accountant. In each case, he would add, in the first line after the phrase merit and fitness alone, comma, he would add a full phrase, subject to the selectmen's approval by majority vote of its full membership pursuant to Section 5D of the Town Manager Act, comma. So we would propose to make that change to each of the 3 paragraphs. And in addition, in the second paragraph having to do with fire chief, in the first line of what's now printed, he would add a comma after remove. So all 3 of them would end up with the same substantive phrasing, including use of commas. And each of them would repeat that phrase, subject to the selectmen's approval, et cetera, twice. Everybody before we have discussion, everybody understand the text of the amendment? Is there a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. Procedurally, again, as we did with the prior amendment, we're going to discuss this amendment, and then we'll vote on the amendment, and then pass or fail, we'll go back to continue discussion of the main motion, either as amended or not. Is there discussion? Mr. McMorris, and then I'll recognize Mr. Dormitzer.
Thank you. Both on the amendment and the main motion, the summary in the back, the appendix of the warrant, gives just a few words as to what the prior, or the existing, I guess, bylaw is, and then lays out the entire amendment. My question is, what changes are we actually making to this section, these sections of the bylaw, and why?
Is there somebody who would like to respond to that? Mr. Wakeman.
Sam Wakeman, 255 Atlantic Avenue. I was also a member of the Governance Committee. The intent of these 3 paragraphs was to mimic the Town Manager Act at advice of council.
I'd recognize Mr. Dormitzer.
Ralph Dormitzer, 111 Atlantic Ave. This is just a small change, but it seems to me that what we really should do is map to the Town Manager Act. The Town Manager Act is similarly, but not the same. It says the town manager shall appoint upon merit and fitness alone and may remove the police chief, fire chief, director of finance, etc. It doesn't insert in advance of that subject to the selectmen's approval. So it goes on again. The town manager shall approve upon merit and fitness alone and may remove the police chief, fire chief, director of finance subject to the selectmen's approval by a majority vote. Why don't we just reorient the language exactly the way it is here? Because quite frankly, it's simpler if we don't try to change the language in the bylaw as compared to what it is in the Town Manager Act, that's all. And all we have to do is identify each of the 3 police chief, fire chief, and director of finance with the same language. Use the Town Manager Act language.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment? Ms. Dormitzer.
Dormitzer, 111 Atlantic Ave. I think all you need to do is add a comma in the section on the fire chief. It was a typographical error, and I think that's what one of the previous speakers was alluding to. It's not clear because the comma is missing, and that's the only comma missing is in the section on the police chief and the director of finance.
Thank you. Is there further discussion of the proposed amendment? Very well, we'll proceed to vote on the proposed amendment made by Mr. McMorris. It does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is defeated. We'll return to further discussion of the main motion. It was amended by our first proposed amendment. It was not amended by the second one. Is there further discussion of the main motion? Mr. Goodwin.
Ronnie Goodwin, 166 Sawyer Street. It's my understanding that the Town Manager Act supersedes the bylaws. So why don't, it's probably we're too far down the road, but why don't the bylaws just say the bylaws should conform to the Town Manager Act and do away with the bylaws, or just have them reference the Town Manager Act, rather than trying to have 2 separate documents that we're arguing about commas. Thank you.
Thank you. Does someone want to respond to that, or Mr. Gomer?
The previous speaker brings up an excellent point. $44 million got voted aye in 34 seconds, and we've spent 24 minutes on a comma. Let's add some perspective here. The Town Manager Act, however, is a framework, a very broad framework. Underneath that framework, you have the option to choose the details. That's the basis for the bylaws. The bylaws are the details that define exactly where you go within that framework.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Dick.
Mike Dick, 27 Parker Ave, and I'm here beating a dead horse, I realize. But I think Dave McMorris's point is well taken. I am confused by the language and want to know, and I'll ask Town Council, on appointing these chiefs, do the selectmen approve the town manager's selection?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. We're voting on the main motion as it was amended by the First Amendment. Does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted by the requisite majority vote. We'll proceed to Article 23, Zoning Bylaw Reconciliation. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. For the Planning Board, I'll recognize Mr. Stuart Ivamy.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As part of the every 5 or 10 years, the Planning Board will update the packet of zoning bylaws that you can buy downtown from the Planning Department, or we're going to publish them online. You can get them there. And when we updated these and collated all the changes that have been brought into the bylaws over the last 8 or 10 years, we discovered any number of typographical errors. This Article 23 does nothing substantive to the bylaws except fix any number of embarrassing typographical errors.
Thank you. The Board of Selectmen has voted 5-0 in favor of this motion, and the Advisory Committee has voted 9-0 in favor of this motion. Is there discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion under Article 23, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is adopted unanimously. We'll proceed to Article 24, Registered Marijuana Dispensaries. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Motion? Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. Again, from the Planning Board, I'll recognize Mr. Stuart Ivamy.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Again, Stuart Ivamy, Chairman of the Planning Board. Let me tell you first what this bylaw does not do. This bylaw does not permit the use of marijuana in Cohasset. This bylaw does not permit the operation of a medical marijuana store in Cohasset. This bylaw does not permit the growing of medical marijuana in Cohasset. That decision was made by the citizens of the Commonwealth by ballot initiative in November of 2012, where the Commonwealth voted to permit the use of medical marijuana in Cohasset. So let no one say that the Planning Board is letting marijuana and Sodom and Gomorrah to reign through the streets of Cohasset. So what has happened since then? Since then, the Attorney General for the Commonwealth has opined that a municipality, by its zoning bylaws, may not prohibit the use or the use of real estate for growing and dispensing medical marijuana. You cannot, by regulation via bylaw, regulate the ballot initiative out of existence. So we were left with several options in Cohasset. One was to do nothing. If we were to do nothing, then a medical marijuana dispensary could be permitted in any business district in Cohasset without any local zoning restrictions whatsoever. That we didn't think was a good idea. The third thing we could do was to regulate it so onerously that it would regulate it out of existence and expose the town to tens of thousands of dollars worth of litigation should someone want to put a dispensary here, because you can't, through regulation, prevent an act that is an act of the people via referendum. The third thing we could have done was to act reasonably with it and treat it like any other business. And treat it, essentially, limit where it can occur and under the circumstances that the running of a medical marijuana dispensary could occur in Cohasset. And that's what we've done. What simply have done is to propose to you that we permit by a special permit, not as of right, somebody who wants to run a medical marijuana dispensary in Cohasset, after they get approval from the state, they've got to site it in what's called the light industrial business district, which is known by you and I to the area where Hingham Lumber is, where the Williams Landscaping Supplies are, where the medical building up on the hill is, and where the Brass Kettle Brook is. That is a sufficiently large area to permit the running of one of these dispensaries that someone couldn't challenge us by saying you legislated it out of existence by having it in too small of an area. We don't think it's a good idea to have these things downtown. We don't think they're a good idea to have these things around schools. To some degree, treat them the same way you would alcohol. That being said, they are different because the Board of Selectmen don't have the ability to license these entities. They are licensed by the state through an application process regulated, or an application process to the Department of Health in Massachusetts. So fundamentally, all we do in this is say where you can do it and how you can do it. Fundamentally, 99% of this bylaw parrots the regulations promulgated by the Massachusetts Department of Health. Of particular interest is on page 19, subparagraph 4, which states that you can't put one of these dispensaries within 500 feet of a school, daycare center, and a, quote, facility in which children commonly congregate. That language we all have a little bit of trouble with because it's vague, and what is a facility in which children commonly congregate? The answer to that is I don't know. But that's the language used in the regulation, and that's the language, therefore, that needs to go into our bylaw, not to make it any more complicated than that for you. There was also a circumstance where someone who is eligible to use medical marijuana can get what's called a hardship permit, if you will, from the Massachusetts Department of Health. A hardship presumably is predicated upon, due to their illness or their financial capability, they don't have the wherewithal to go to the dispensary and buy this stuff. The Department of Health in Boston can issue these folks a permit to grow their own at home and to have a 30-day supply on hand. How much is a 30-day supply? I'm hearing everyone think. Well, according to the regulations, that's 10 ounces of pot. And they're allowed to grow their own under the regulations of the Department of Health of Massachusetts. Paragraph 16 and those subparagraphs deal with what we're going to expect of somebody who's operating under the hardship. Fundamentally, keep it indoors. Don't have it in an area where people can see it from the street. Don't encourage people to break in and steal your agricultural efforts. And that's fundamentally what it is. The third area that a medical marijuana dispensary is the farming of it. And should anybody want to farm in Cohasset, we simply say you're going to do it indoors and you're going to do it in a secure facility, which essentially is what's required under the regulations. All this would be done, recall, under a special permitting process by which they're going to have to come before the planning board seeking a special permit, where we'll be able to put individualized restrictions on how they operate depending upon the circumstances of where they are and what their intentions are. I think that's all I have, sir.
Great, thank you. The Board of Selectmen has voted in favor of this motion by a vote of 5-0. The Advisory Committee has voted in favor by a vote of 8-1. Is there discussion? Sir.
My name is Owen O'Malley. I live at 29 Sawyer Street. I'm surprised that there isn't a lot of discussion about this. We don't need marijuana dispensaries in Cohasset. I don't care, I personally don't care what the Attorney General says. She could be challenged on that. Now, you're gonna put it up on 3A? 3A has multiple problems. You want people driving around with marijuana, smoking? I don't want to face that. And there's a study coming up on improvements on 3A there's been a multiple number of accidents up there. And the idea also that we're gonna keep marijuana dispensaries 500 feet away from the kids, that's nuts. I mean, the kids will find out about it before half the adults will. Again, we just don't need it. Marijuana is a dangerous drug. I don't care what you read in the Globe or Channel 5 or Sound Bites. It has long-term deleterious effects on the human body, the brain cell, the DNA structure. We should send a message to people who want to make money from marijuana that we don't want it in Cohasset. We don't want, up on 3A, they don't allow hamburger places up there. It's okay for Weymouth to have hamburger places, but we don't want Wendy's and things like that up there. What do we want a marijuana dispensary up there? I urge you, despite the fact that a lot of people don't seem to be terribly interested, to vote down this. Have some courage, challenge the Attorney General. We don't want it in Cohasset. If there's lawsuits, we'll deal with them when it comes down the road. We've had plenty of lawsuits. No to marijuana dispensaries.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Very well. We'll proceed to a voice vote. It does require 2/3 vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion on Article 24, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion did pass by the requisite 2/3 vote. We'll proceed to Article 25, petitioned article, expansion of the Central Cohasset Wastewater Sewer System District. It is proposed that this article be indefinitely postponed. May I have a motion for indefinite postponement? Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. All those in favor of indefinite postponement, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. It is indefinitely postponed. Article 26 is a petitioned article, Town of Cohasset Governance Committee. Their petitioner's motion is included in your packet. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. Is there a second? The motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. For the petitioners, I'll recognize Mr. Ralph Dormitzer. Oh, sorry. I recognize Mr. Merle Brown.
This article is a citizen petition to have a governance committee essentially continue what we have now, but it would be voted by the Troika rather than to the selectmen. And I just want to mention from your warrant, there's been a slight change on the last paragraph, last line. It said in the warrant, it said the further should the committee recommend includes bylaw changes and or changes to the governance documents, the Board of Selectmen will reserve articles on the warrant to present this to the town meeting. That's been taken out, and the addition on the bottom has been the town governance and makeup of recommendations for improvements thereof, including potential changes to the town bylaws and the Town Managers Act as deemed necessary. The committee shall report to the selectmen. The committee will make regular reports either by writing or at a Board of Selectmen's meeting. So it's strictly under the auspices of the Board of Selectmen. And just a little background on it. Why do we need a standing governance committee? The work of looking at our town governance should be an ongoing effort. I know from having worked for this 2 years, although we have accomplished so much there is still a lot of work to be done pertaining to the bylaws and the structures, appointments, and processes and term limits of our boards and committees. And we hardly touch the surface, and we've only gone through the Town Managers Act and the bylaws to the Town Managers Act. And there's a lot out there to be done. The Selectmen set up the original committee to do the very same work that this article is requesting. This work must continue and should be done now, not put on a shelf. There is now a wealth of knowledge that should be not wasted. It is important to note that there is a bylaw committee now on the books. However, they are strictly an edit function for checking spelling, grammar, and format to present the bylaws properly. A standing governance committee would do all of the other research and work required to keep our bylaws up to date, make suggestions for improvements, and to keep all our governing documents synchronized. Why have a troika appointment? This is not meant to take the power away from the selectmen, but the citizens who signed the petition feel strongly that the appointment for the governance committee should be kept as non-political as possible. The chairman represents the selectmen in the troika, and the troika would make the appointments. The bylaw. Some have said that the petition is overstepping the selectmen. We don't believe this is the case at all. A governance committee would report to the selectmen. A governance committee would be an asset to the selectmen, and the board should welcome the work and the commitment of the dedication of the people that was willing to do it. As you can see from the motion, the final two sentences are deleted, and the new sentence states very clearly that the committee reports to the Board of Selectmen and has been included to make it completely clear that the committee will work with and for the selectmen and the town. Thank you, and hope you support this article.
Thank you. For the Board of Selectmen, I'll recognize Mr. Steve Gummer.
First of all, allow me to open by expressing the gratitude of the Board of Selectmen to the Governance Committee for the 2 long years of work that they've done under changing charges, by the way. Having said that, I've had the opportunity to stand before you tonight and explain divided votes by the board. It seems that I'm always talking to you about the vote where I was in the minority, so I'm not sure how I get this honor, and I do so again. The board voted 3-2 against recommending this article. However, the vote needs a bit of explanation. In our in our board meetings, we entertained this original proposal and found, frankly, that there was common ground amongst all 5 selectmen that there was a need for such a committee. The variance, however, was that we had quite literally 2 half-hour segments in 2 separate meetings to discuss the nature of that committee and what it should do. Oh yeah, there were certainly some issues we had with the original language in the proposed article, specifically with regard to the ability for the proposed standing committee to have direct access to the warrant. Having said that, this amended article that is before you now is not something that the committee had tremendous amounts of time to consider. And that, in my opinion, at the very least, has led to the 3-2 vote against recommendation. That vote was taken tonight because it was the first time we saw the amended article. It's best not to make decisions about standing elements of your government in a hurry. Having said that, I am doing nothing personally but recommending that this idea not go quietly into the night. You will vote your conscience this evening. The Board of Selectmen has recommended 3-2 against the proposed article. However, recall the way I opened this, that the board generally agrees with the need. I will leave you with one thought, however. How many people understand the definition of governance, which is the core of this article? Just show of hands. How many definitions do you think there are listed on the term governance? 27, looking at 2 pages on Google. My point in saying this is we absolutely have a need, but let's clearly define what that need is. Thank you.
Thank you. For the advisory committee, I'll recognize Mr. Peter Piscator.
The advisory committee voted 7-2 not to recommend continuance of the governance committee. And we also respect and applaud all the work that's gone in. But we think there should be a committee that reviews the bylaws. We also think that should be more of an academic committee that looks at the bylaws and how they fit in with the state laws and how we run the town. And focused on the bylaws. We think that the open-ended governance charter here is too broad, and if it was more defined, we think that we think there's a need for some specialization on the bylaws. And broadly, you know, the role of the selectmen is to review the operations of the town and select and describe policies to bring that, you know, bring improvements to the operations of the town. So we think there's a little crossover here, and we'd like to see a much more focused committee. We think there's a need for some committee that would be focused on bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Yes, Ms. Carlson.
Good evening. My name is Mary Jo Larson, and I'm actually right now serving as the chairperson of the Governance Committee. And what I'd like to point out first, to make sure that there's no confusion, is that what we are voting on now is on page 14 of the proposed town manager motion. So it's the handout that you just received. The reason that we are proposing a governance committee, and this governance committee does not have to be made up of the same individuals that have been working together for the past, well, I just joined a year ago, but a number of years. But I can tell you that there is a tremendous advantage to having informed citizens, people who represent this town, who actually understand what the Town Manager Act is, who have actually read through the bylaws, who are trying to understand how to make sure that they align basically the spirit of the annual town meeting and the citizens' involvement, the culture of this town really, with the practices and procedures. It's not just a legal exercise. It's not just a matter of commas. You really sit and deliberate. So, for example, when Merle spoke here, I mean, Merle represents someone whose family has been in this town since 1812. His grandfather and great-grandfather were selectmen. There's a certain history that's involved when Merle's involved in our discussions, whereas Ralph has been a selectman. I have people here who have been on capital budget. I have been in this town almost 6 years, but my work is actually internationally working on governance. So that is my profession. So you bring citizens together who are interested in the bylaws, the Town Manager Act, and you deliberate and you really make sure that you are keeping up with the practices and the changes that are taking place in the town. Absolutely, the idea is that the proposals go to the selectmen. We report to the selectmen, no question, but don't give up our right as citizens to petition if there are things that we think should be changed. So I urge you to vote yes to continue your governance committee, and the whole question of making sure that it reflects the different perspectives of the town is very important, and that is one of the reasons we suggested the Troika. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Kasparowicz.
Excuse me, Ray Kasparowicz, 172 South Main Street. As I stand here, I don't know what I'm going to say other than this. This town has gone through hell in 3 years. It's been an exhausting process. And sometimes I get the feeling that we're self-analyzing so much that right foot goes in front of the left goes in front, and we're analyzing so much we forget how to walk. It's paralysis through analysis. I think the town needs a rest. I think I heard someone, a town official, say that the governance committee was to be sunsetted. It's had, quoting this person, 3 sunsets. Maybe it's time for sunset. Let's have a rest. We got a new town manager. Let's function for a while. When the selectmen perceive the need for examination of certain bylaws or procedures or terms of office, let's go back to it. I'd like to see us rest. And I think we have, the town manager won't say it, maybe he'll say it in 3 months or 6 months. He's already dealing with 5 selectmen, all the department heads, fire department, police department. Now we have, I've heard committees mentioned, and I've audited towns for 30 years. I've heard committees tonight, I didn't know we had them. We're talking long-range planning committee, capital budget committee, the advisory board. I was in the town of Walpole, I was chairman of the finance committee there. The town manager drew up the budget, we reviewed it, we knocked it back and forth, we incorporated long-term budgeting in that process. It worked. And Walpole was 2 or 3 times bigger than this town. I think sometimes we make it too complicated. We got the same people on a number of committees. I don't know what it's doing other than confusing a lot of us, creating a lot of effort, a lot of confusion, and I want to take a rest for a few years. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Canali.
Four years ago, we found out we didn't have an accounting system that actually kept track of all our finances. It was so bad that our accountants told us to throw away the books and start all over again. This is what happens when you don't have transparency and good governance, and you don't have people watching what's going on in town. The Governance Committee has worked 3.5 years to establish some sort of organization to how we govern ourselves. The meetings have been open to the public. Everything's been done in the open. These are recommendations that we've made to better the town governance. I mean, there are no secrets here. There are very few people in this town who understand how the town works. And giving the town a rest is not the way to move us to the next step. We still have significant problems in this town. We still have things that don't work well. If we want to be one of the better managed towns in the state, like Wellesley, Sherburne, Arlington, Brookline, there are many more things we need to do to make this town work correctly. That's all the Governance Committee's been trying to do, is take best practices and put them into action. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead. Ms. Morris over here.
Trish Morris, 78 Forest Avenue. One of the reasons why the original Governance Committee was formed was to take a look at how committees are appointed and how they are relieved of their appointments. That work, although we started it in earnest, has not been finished, and I think it's critical work. All that would need would be for the Board of Selectmen to make that the charge of the next Governance Committee, whoever they shall be. The original Governance Committee that I've sat on for 2 years had a very specific charge. It was given by the Board of Selectmen. That's what we worked on. Any future boards would do the same thing. And I would also encourage anyone who's critical of the work that this group has done or has any questions about the nature of any future work should actually raise their hands and volunteer and offer their minds and their talents and their time and actually sit on the committee and contribute and move the town forward.
Thank you. Ms. McCann?
Agnes McCann, 104 Doan Street. It's been my experience that even if a governance committee or a committee focusing on good governance is a good idea, we did not end up with one. We ended up with a committee that has been trying to govern. And we don't govern by committee. We're a town, we come to town meeting, we elect selectmen, and the best way to promote accountability, transparency, and the effective use of limited town resources is to elect good selectmen and good other officers. And I think that this proposed committee would just amount to, a group selected. We don't know why, we don't know with what skills, we're not sure by whom, but in the hands of, the selection process is in the hands of 3 people only, and that it would be simply a group that might end up second guessing the selectmen who we elected. And I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Ms. Jenkins?
Leonore Jenkins, 198 Jerusalem Road. While we were all sleeping, I have noticed that we have a bylaw committee in town, and I had to bring the attention to the powers that be in town that people on the bylaw committee don't know the bylaws because they commit acts against the bylaws of the town. So I think we really do need someone who is going to be looking after our governance and our bylaws. An interested party, not people who have been on committees forever and just poo-poo everything.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
Francis Collins, 404 South Main Street. I think we have to listen to Steve Goma's definition of governance. We can pick one of the 27, or we can use all 27 of them. But we need to know what it is that we're governing. We have a bylaw study committee, and I think the bylaw study committee maybe it needs to be revitalized, maybe it needs to be redirected, but we have a committee already in place that should be able to study our bylaws. We have a governance committee that was set up with a specific task, things to do. They've done them, and there was a sunset agreement, and the last time they said we'll have the final sunset will be at this town meeting, as I recall. So I think that the governance committee, and I applaud them for the fine work that they've done, and I think they've certainly taken a lot of heat and done some good for us, but let's let that committee dissolve as we had all decided. Maybe we need to have the selectmen take a look at the bylaw study committee and perhaps revitalize them, pump them up a little bit, and give them a new charge, and let's proceed from there. I think at this point the advisory committee has not recommended this. The selectmen basically have not recommended this, and I think we should vote it down and go home. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pease?
Sam Pease, 3 Sankey Road. I'd like to call the question, please.
Thank you. Mr. Pease has called a question. That's a motion to stop debate. It's not debatable itself. Requires a 2/3 vote. So what we'll do is we'll vote first whether to stop debate. If that passes by a 2/3 vote, then we'll go back and vote on the main motion. So is everybody ready? This is a vote to whether to continue or stop debate. An affirmative vote stops debate. A negative vote permits debate to continue. All those in favor of the motion to stop debate, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion to stop debate was adopted by the requisite 2/3 vote. We'll now proceed directly to a vote on the main motion. Proceeding on the vote on the motion under Article 26 requires a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. All right, I'm going to have to ask you for that again, I'm afraid. We'll start again, full vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask for a hand count. That's very, very close. Tellers, would you please take your stations? Same procedures as before. Once the tellers take their stations, I'll ask for people to hold up the red slips of paper for an affirmative vote. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by holding up your red slip in the air, please, nice and high so they can see it. Keep the hands up nice and high. Okay, tellers, you've had those written down? Okay, all those opposed, please hold your red slips up in the air nice and high for the tellers. All those opposed. Keep them high if you want to be counted. Okay, great. Looks like all the tellers have their tallies. You can put your hands down and I will announce the results as soon as I add them up. The vote is 46 in favor, 75 opposed. The motion fails. We'll proceed to action under Article 27. It's proposed that action under this article be indefinitely postponed. May I have a motion for indefinite postponement? May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded for indefinite postponement. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The motion is indefinitely postponed. Proceed to action under Article 28, petitioned article. The petitioner's motion is in your packet. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting? Thank you. May I have a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. For the petitioners, I'll recognize Mr. Gabriel Gomez.
Gabriel Gomez, 59 Highland Avenue. Thank you, sir. The purpose of this article is pretty simple. It's really just to provide, additional transparency and really to just take the politics out of the patronage. Cohasset's a town that's been a leader in a lot of different areas, and I think that this is an opportunity for us to even be further leaders in the South Shore. I think it's an opportunity to distinguish ourselves from the other towns that are having problems with the kind of transparency that you read about down in D.C. And I just want to ask, as clarification, why the Board of Selectmen would be against, giving the opportunity for the people to actually see transparency through the board here, please.
Thank you. For the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Cohen would like to speak? I recognize Mr. Fred Cohen.
Well, we're just looking at the new language tonight, but when we reviewed this, we're not opposed to it in concept. We just think that there are many state laws already in effect, the State Ethics Commission, the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, Inspector General, many other areas if there's a problem in Cohasset, that we have the resources to send our inquiries up and have them fairly investigated outside of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Advisory Committee, Mr. George Chemillard.
First off, the vote was 5-1. We all of us agreed with the concept that patronage is not an acceptable practice in town. Having said that, though, those who were opposed to it had really 2 points. One is that the complexity of trying to administrate this can get pretty severe. And number 2, the role of the Board of Selectmen is not to write these kind of agreements. That's the town manager's job. In favor, though, is clearly, it's a clear statement of our strategy and our values and our practices. And those who support it felt that having this image in front of the town and all of its officials regularly was very beneficial.
Could you clarify, was your 5-1 vote in favor or opposed?
5-1 was to not recommend.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Ms. Kennedy.
I just want to clarify the answer to Mr. Gomez's question. The board voted 5-0 not to recommend Article 28 as presented in the warrant, which specifically put the patronage issue on the members of the Board of Selectmen. So as you can see in your warrant, it read, members of the Board of Selectmen, their spouses or partners are prohibited from pressuring, influencing, or taking any other action, etc. It's very different than the petitioned article motion that we got tonight. So thus the 5-0 disapproval.
Mr. Gomez.
Here we go, Ms. 59 Highland Avenue. Since the wording was changed on the petition that was issued tonight, then is there a different vote from the Board of Selectmen?
While they're discussing it, we'll get back to Mr. Gomez did ask a question. We'll give them a moment to discuss it. Is there any further discussion while the board is deciding whether to have a vote or not? Mr. Deck.
Mike Dick, 27 Parker Ave. Just a comment that it's been very difficult tonight trying to make a good judgment on bylaws, which are the foundation upon which we govern ourselves. And I have a hard time accepting amendments to bylaws on the floor of town meeting personally. So I would hope that perhaps we can take the new wording, bring it back for further consideration when it's been presented to the Board of Selectmen. They can deliberate without having the pressure of coming up with a vote in front of everybody and not have the opportunity to discuss amongst themselves. On the surface, this seems like a very benign kind of an item, but I just think the way we're going about it is all wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Steve Gomer.
To answer the petitioner directly, the Board of Selectmen has had no opportunity to examine the new language. It arrived before us less than 15 minutes before the start of the meeting itself. Generally speaking, the Board, under the original language, recognizes the seriousness, however, found two particular items at issue. One previously explained by Selectman Kennedy. The second one is that, interestingly enough, while the Board of Selectmen are identified in the original language as the potential offending party rather than elected and appointed officials as a whole, the new language actually puts the Board of Selectmen in charge of determining how this would be enforced. So, two things that I would ask that the town meeting conclude at the moment is, first, could we please be given ample opportunity to consider materially different language than the first representation that we had in front of us? And the second is, could you maybe help us resolve how the monkeys are going to take charge of the cage? Thanks.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. Goodwin.
Ronnie Goodwin, 166 Soy Street. So I'm confused. Is what the handout tonight, is that what we're voting on? And does that not have the selectmen's recommendation? The printout tonight?
What we are voting on is indeed what is in the handout. I believe there, Fred may correct, I believe the recommendation underneath may be confusing because I believe that may not have been updated.
Well, that was carried over from the original?
That sounds correct to me.
Right. I understand this was emailed late last night, so the selectmen just got it when we came into the town meeting like everybody else. So we really haven't had a chance to discuss it. Although previously we did vote 5-0, not in favor of what was in place before.
Okay, I would just urge people to vote against it based on the comments by Selectman Cohen. And also, it's maybe I'm a little too sensitive, but it seems like insulting to the elected officials that we have to add another layer of, addressing patronage when it doesn't seem to be a big issue in Cohasset. So I would urge you to vote no.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? We'll proceed to a voice vote. It does require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion under Article 28, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. The motion is defeated. We'll proceed to action under Article 29, also a petitioner's article. The petitioner's motion is likewise in your packet. I think it may suffer from the same issues in terms of my guess is that the recommendations that are set forth in there may relate to prior language, but the text of the motion that you're being asked to vote on is indeed in the packet. May I have a motion in the form distributed to the meeting and included in that packet? Thank you. Is there a second? Motion has been made and seconded. It does require a majority vote for adoption. Again, I will recognize for the petitioners Mr. Gabriel Gomez.
Thank you, sir. Gabriel Gomez, 59 Highland Avenue. It's along the same principles as the previous petition, sir. And it's really just to enhance the transparency of what's going on in town. And again, I'd like to ask the board to just kind of justify or just tell the assembly here exactly what the reasoning was behind, hiding or, not willing to disclose in writing prior to voting, as the petition here says. All of that is asked just for full transparency so that we have a better understanding and that we feel better about what's going on in town. That's all we're asking. We're not pointing any fingers or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you. For the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Fred Cohen.
Again, using the same reasons I used before, under the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, there are highly regulated laws and regulations. They have a sitting committee that looks at this stuff. Under the Office of Campaign and Political Finance laws, anything over $50 must be reported and filed to the town clerk's office 8 days prior to an election, 30 days after, and annually. So we are already disclosing under the law everything that is above $50 in all our campaign activities. And under the ethics law, we're not allowed, any public employee is not allowed to accept anything over $50 in a year, and that would be an ethics violation. So we feel that this is redundant, that there's already the State Ethics Commission, the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, and the Inspector General's office, and the Attorney General's office to turn to if there's something going on in Cohasset that needs to be fixed. Thank you.
Thank you. For the advisory committee, Mr. George Chandelard.
The advisory committee voted 5-1 not to recommend this. In discussions in the committee, the argument for it was this is one more vehicle to reinforce the importance of complying with the existing laws. The arguments against it were similar to what has already been said. There is a high level of redundancy in already existing law and the difficulty in implementing it.
Thank you. Ms. Gurka?
Jane Gurka, 100 Nichols Road. This seems to me to be a perfect example of our need for a bylaw review committee. The version that is in the handout tonight could strongly benefit from editing. The last phrase, I believe, has grammatical error and a dangling preposition. And I think this shows the haste with which this version was written, and for that reason alone, I really believe we should reject it.
Ms. Dorrington?
I am a member of the Bylaw Review Committee. We were not called until after the warrant went to print, so nothing that we could do would change anything. Plus, the Bylaw Review Committee is really they're just proofreaders. They can't touch a zoning bylaw or a citizen's petition, so we would not have been able to change a comma on this particular thing, but we would like to be called before the warrant goes to print so that we could avoid that missing comma and other things that could have been changed, could have been corrected.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Mr. DiCaprio.
Peter DiCaprio, 555 Jerusalem Road. For those of you that are not familiar with the state infrastructure and the state bureaucracy, it is distant and impersonal and frequently out of touch. Mr. Chandelard makes a good point that this is an opportunity for us to return a level of governance to the local committee. I mean, here we are tonight. This is as local a form of democratic government as you can find. We should extend it to ethics rules, and we shouldn't rely on the state for oversight. If you happen to find yourself, the state infrastructure can be manipulated. I would much rather be judged and turn over issues at hand to my neighbors than some distant, out-of-touch bureaucrat that might not understand the issues in front of us. I mean, the vote against this, 10-1, implies that, that this particular bylaw change not be given the consideration that I think it deserves. We should return as much government as possible into the community, and this is an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Benetti.
Looking around the room, I can guess that Peter, Dave Bigley, and I are probably the only old hippies around. But there was a comedy group back in the 70s called Firesign Theater, and one of their routines quoted a group called the Department of Redundancy Department. And I think that's how this one was written. This duplicates state law. Anyone who's ever run for a campaign, on a campaign knows that the disclosures you have to make are thorough, and there's no need to have everybody do the same thing over and over and over. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Very well, we'll proceed to a voice vote. On the motion under Article 29, those require a majority vote for adoption. All those in favor of the motion under Article 29, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Nay. The motion is defeated. Before calling for a motion for dissolution, I want to commend all of the elected officials, appointed officials, volunteers who obviously put a huge amount of preparation to this meeting and allowed us to get through 29 articles in under 4 hours. So thank you very much. Thank all of you for staying this way. Great progress in the town. May I have a motion to dissolve? Thank you. May I have a second? All those in favor of dissolution, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Thank you. The meeting is dissolved. Have a good night.